They watch her playing with the animals, and one remarks when she behaves this childishly, they remember that Luria is only a 5-year-old girl. She asks the dog Gugu if he can do math. He lets out a woof. She lets him know she can multiply and divide by 2 digits now. Her reading and writing has also improved. There's so much more she wants to learn. She exclaims she wants to study history and decides to ask father next time. The boy says she is provocative in her academics and swordsmanship and quite mature for her age. His sister concurs, he thinks so. She's a strange one though. But of course, because Luria had memories from her past life. In Luria's past life, she was in the kingdom of Olivanus. The boy beside a little girl cried out, "It hurts." She told him to endure it a little younger. The saint would heal him soon. The saintess appeared and raised her hand, drawing every gaze to her. She prayed aloud, her hand lifted high. A man suddenly shouted that his leg was healed. Healed at last, the little one threw his arms around his sister. Right around the time the silver-haired saint was praying to God, a girl was healing several 1,000 people behind the scenes. The young girl's name was Lausia, known formerly as the princess. Louisa Olivanus was the previous king's daughter and the current king's niece. 10 years ago, when Louisa was 5, her father, a gentle ruler, and her mother, a kind soul, was killed by her uncle, the current king. But he allowed Lausia to live. Lucia's power as the saint was indispensable. She could defeat several thousand monsters by herself and summon a downpour during a drought. Although she was publicly marked as deceased, she was actually controlled with a subordination collar. The Church of the One God became the national religion after aiding in the previous king's assassination. The current king's daughter was labeled as the saint, while Louisa was forced to perform the miracles. Roa watched her helplessly, pleading with her not to die. It was a spirit king who oversaw all the spirits that made up the natural world. He also told her he will share his magic with her. She thanked him, but her uncle snapped, telling her to stop talking to herself. Only Louisa could see him. He was berating himself, asking why could he only affect the world through living creatures if only he could destroy that subordination collar. But even in that state, she smiled gently at him and said it would be okay. If her being tormented could save the city folk, her father and mother treasured, she was okay. Several days later, headquarters of the Church of the One God. Her eyes were wide as she stood there. Roa warned her he had a bad feeling about it. Priest instructed her to put her hands on it and channel her magic. As she moved forward to just do that, the thing moved and she quickly pulled her hands back, shocked. The priest told her not to stop. He orders her to channel her magic into this. She wondered, could it be that inside those things? Roa suddenly said if the humans couldn't hear that scream, it felt like spirits were being killed and turned into crystals. The average human didn't have enough magic to kill a spirit. That's why she had to kill them to produce spirit stones. She mumbled, how could they do something so terrible? The priest told her it was a foolish question. Humans should be able to freely make miracles. For that very reason, spirits existed to serve humans in the name of God. He declared it an order. She was to channel her magic and kill the spirits. Darkness clouded her face before she retorted that she didn't want to. Pain seared through her body from the collar, and she collapsed to the ground. Loisa, Roa called out in desperation, warning her that if she resisted the collar's compulsion any longer, her very soul would be destroyed. The priest screamed that it was an order, demanding she put her hands on it and channel her magic, but she reminded herself that if she died, the spirits would remain alive. Roa realized what she was thinking and begged her not to do that. She only smiled faintly at him and told him everything would be all right, before turning her magic on herself and hurting herself. The surrounding healers urged that it was still possible to save her with their power, but she felt relieved, believing the spirits would now be safe from the torment of being trapped. With that final thought, she breathed her last. The priest crossed his arms, scoffing that she had died a useless piece of trash, only for a surge of power to suddenly erupt, Roa's fury breaking loose as he demanded how they dared do this to gentle Loisa, vowing he would never let them get away with it. After Louisa's death, large cities, including the capital, suffered from endless rain, while the breadbasket of the nation received not a single drop. Earthquakes shook the ground, tsunamis, rain rampant, and several volcanoes erupted. 1/3 of the citizens died. The nobles and commoners thought the Church of the One God brought forth God's wrath. The royal family, the holy princess included, were publicly executed by stoning. The people, having lost faith in their king, readily dragged him off his throne. They painted Louisa, as the Witch of Calamity, who cursed them all. Thus in the Church of the One God's Holy Scripture, her name was recorded as Louisa the Catastrophe. After that, Louisa floated in darkness. She cried out as a newborn and, to her own shock, realized the voice belonged to her. In legends, fables, folk tales and records from magicians of antiquity, there were records of a phenomenon known as reincarnation. She wonders if she has been reincarnated. Through her blurred vision, she sees a lady calling her a cute baby. She wishes to see her face and opens her eyes again, this time seeing her clearly. This person is Mama. Amalia Farnese, mother of the reincarnation. She finds some kind of dark haze around her mother. Then her gaze shifts to her father, Grauf Faroa Farnese. Silver hair, blue eyes. She realizes he is royalty. Shivering instantly, she thinks a bully. Her eyes narrow as she glares at him. Her mother says what an energetic baby and turns to the father saying to look at their beautiful baby. Cupping her cheek, he admits she is beautiful, but what about her? She reminds him they discussed how dangerous this was, didn't they? When he hesitates, she snaps at him to get a hold of himself. After she dies, this one will have him, her father, to take care of her. Freaking out, Luria thinks Mama is gonna die. Yet Mama only smiles weakly and says it's time for milk. Luria drinks, but to her it tastes wrong, spoiled by the strange haze around her mother. Luria silently wishes the haze away and to her relief it fades, making the milk taste sweet again. When she finishes, her mother hands the baby to her husband, telling him she leaves the child in his care before collapsing into a faint. A girl rushes to her side, murmuring in disbelief, asking how such a thing can be. The husband falls to his knees with a dramatic cry, demanding why the god spirits have taken Amalia from him, but the lady tells him firmly to get a hold of himself, that Amalia has only fallen asleep. She urges him to remain calm as she explains that the curse placed upon the madam has been dispelled. Wide-eyed, he blurts out, asking how that is possible. He asks, Amalia has been sick since the start of her pregnancy because of the curse, right? She replies that is correct. He points out even the best doctor with the best healing magic in the country couldn't dispel it, so how? Lady explains she senses that his daughter used healing magic. But Grauf quickly points out she's only a baby, that is impossible. She insists it is possible. After she gave birth to her son and breastfeed him, she sensed the presence of spirit magic from him. But he reminds her his son is a genius who became a court mage at the age of 10. And despite that, he refuses to believe that his son was the cause. Those who create curses are known as sorcerers. Curses cast by sorcerers can only be dispelled by stronger spirit magic. His expression hardens with seriousness. A baby who dispelled a curse that even the best healer in the country couldn't. Moreover, she is royalty. The political implications are too great. He knows she might be killed before she can even reach adulthood. He looks at her and orders her to keep this quiet, not to breathe a word even to his father or brother. She flinches, repeating in disbelief, His Majesty and His Royal Highness. But then quickly bows her head and murmurs that it will be as he wishes. Later, as she sleeps, the little spirits gather around her, only to fall silent when the present king appears. He tells them they must not speak to her until she comes of age. When they ask why, he explains that humans take time before they can speak, and besides, ordinary humans cannot see or hear them. Then his gaze shifts to the girl. Watching her sleep, he notes with quiet wonder that she used magic without relying on their spirit power. Because of the reincarnation spell the Spirit King Roa used at the cost of his life, Louisa's soul was transformed. A spirit in human form that can directly draw power from the world. That is the new Louisa. The Spirit King guesses using magic as a baby was too much for her. He prays that she grows up healthy and strong. Gratitude swells within him, knowing that because she freed them, they can remain with her. Nestling against her, he wishes her nothing but a happy life. Meanwhile, a dog runs off and comes upon other animals, baring his teeth at them. As the big eagle lunges at him, the dog dashes back and slips behind the bushes outside the mansion. When the carriage enters through the gates, he runs alongside it and somehow slips inside the mansion. Soon, he finds himself near the baby, gazing at her with a smile. With a quick leap, he lands on her crib and settles beside her. The sound of his panting wakes Luria. She blinks at him in surprise, wondering if her family owns a puppy. Then, as he suddenly rises to his feet, she realizes he can sense spirits. Just then, her mother enters, and the nanny quickly gets up. Her mother freezes, startled to see the dog, and only now does the nanny notice it and blurts out, "When did it get here?" The maid scolds her, asking what if something had happened to the young miss while she was asleep. Carelessly, the nanny scoops up the puppy and says, "Such a dirty puppy. How did it even get inside?" Amalia, however, gently instructs her to support the pup's back properly. "It looks so helpless," she adds softly. Studying the puppy, she says doesn't recognize it. Does it belong to someone? Or did it just wander in from outside? The maid finds it hard to believe that a stray somehow managed to sneak into the young miss's bedroom and decides to investigate who brought the puppy, saying it is important they find out. Holding the baby in her arms, Amalia tells the maid to change the bedsheet afterward. The maid agrees, as the puppy is indeed dirty and it's unhygienic. The maid then asks what they should do with the puppy. Luria inwardly pleads not to throw it away, but to her relief, her mother tells her to give it a bath. The puppy wags its tail and she pulls Luria closer, remarking that it seems her baby likes it, so she decided to adopt it and take good care of it. Meanwhile, the spirit informs the Spirit King that Fenrir has arrived. He replies he noticed it and now they can relax. Having a Fenrir, a powerful guardian beast, by her side is very reassuring. Spirits have a neutral enemy, the ones known as sorcerers. The technology the Church of the One God used to trap the spirits utilized sorcery from them. Likewise, the curse that had been corroding Amalia was from them. The spirits can only affect the transient world through people, so it is difficult to protect themselves from sorcerers. That's where the guardian beasts come in. They can do it. Fenrir, as the mortal enemy of sorcerers, won't let any of them harm Louisa. But Fenrir is still a child, so they must not let their guard down. The spirit then asks, why does the Spirit King only come out when Lady Louisa is asleep? He admits his appearance stands out. Lady Louisa would surely try to talk to him, and talking to spirits isn't good for a baby's development. And if she does try to talk to him, it will hurt his heart too much to ignore her. The Spirit King decides to check on Fenrir. Meanwhile, in the bathroom, the maid is scrubbing him down in the bathtub, grumbling that he really is filthy. The waters turn dirty, and she insists she definitely cannot allow such a filthy body near the young miss. The maid then tells him she's going to wash his face, so she should close his eyes. The Spirit King watches them, thinking despite her attitude, she must like dogs. He was a bit worried, but it looks like Fenrir is enjoying itself. The spirit, besides him, adds she is good at cleaning. Once scrubbed spotless, he beams at the maid. She tells him there's no use acting cute with her, his owner is the madam. But then his tongue brushes her cheek. She tells him to sit tight while she fetches some milk. When she is gone, the Spirit King approaches him and says he is sure getting pampered here and reminds him he has to take care of Lady Louisa. Meanwhile, Louisa thinks she is Louisa, but then reminds herself, not anymore, and she doesn't have a name yet. All day she's babbling, sleeping, waking up and drinking breast milk. Her fingers twitch, and the puppy reaches out to them. Their smiles meet. She wonders, what day is it? Where is she, and who is she? She doesn't know why, but she's certain she reincarnated. In that case, she wonders, what should she do with this new life? She is concerned that her father has the same color hair and eyes as the royalty in her previous life. Based on his behavior and familial situation, he seems to be an aristocrat of sorts. It's possible that she's in the same country. Her past life was full of pain. She managed to maintain her sanity thanks to the kindness of the spirits and the goats in her livestock shed. She doesn't want to go through that again. She doesn't want to get involved in the fights over the throne or disputes over titles. She thinks there are plenty of spirits in the mountains and it would be nice to be among fluffy animals. Suddenly, a spark ignites in her eyes. She thinks she finally knows her goal. She wants to live comfortably in the mountains surrounded by animals. Just then her papa enters her room and complains the puppy got in her crib again. The nanny picks the puppy, apologizing that she hadn't noticed. He turns to her and says no matter how clean it is unsanitary to allow an animal near a baby. But suddenly, she starts thrashing in the crib. The puppy isn't bad. He picks her up, chuckling that she's too cute, waving her little limbs like that. The nanny smiles, remarking that the young miss must really love the master. He presses a kiss to her temple, only for her to give him a sharp little glare. The nanny then adds she often catches the young miss looking at the master's face. The poor girl thinks that is because she glares at him. Her father then remarks she is so cute, she looks more and more like Amalia each day. Her eyes widen at that and blush creeps across her cheeks. He gently pokes her cheek, telling her she's a good girl and must grow up big and strong. Meanwhile, a carriage pulls up at the mansion's gate. The birds perched nearby remain unusually still, their beady eyes fixed on the newcomer. He frowns, unsettled. Nothing stirs around him, yet it feels as though countless unseen monsters are watching. Impossible, he tells himself. There isn't even a stray dog in the forest. It's safe. He forces the unease down and urges himself to get home. 10 days later, the same man stands before her, announcing that he will conduct the christening. She panics as he wears the very same clothes as the bullies from her past life. Grauff thanks him for his services and the priest responds with calm assurance to leave everything to him. Then his gaze shifts, fixing on her. He notices she has red hair and eyes, unlike her siblings. Her father, proud, remarks that it's a beautiful color, isn't it? The man replies he supposes. Then the archbishop poured water on her forehead. This was a baptism. She remembers being told that she also had undergone that in her past life. She deemed it a pointless and unproductive, worthless ceremony. He picks her up and whispers in her ear, what an inauspicious color, she will never be happy. Her eyes go wide and then she cries out, telling him to die in her mind. He names her Luria. Then, almost casually, he asks if her father would entrust Lady Luria to their church. Shocked, he blurts out, what is he asking all of a sudden? He replies she has red hair and eyes and is of royal blood, the same as the Witch of Calamity Louisa, who brought destruction upon the royal family and all of humanity. This is an omen. She's surprised by the name and wonders, what does he mean that she brought destruction to the kingdom and its people? Louisa and Luria, it can be a coincidence that they sound similar. The priest then says Lady Luria should serve God at their Church of the One God. That should surely prevent any disasters from befalling. She thinks if she is handed over to the church she will be bullied. She won't be able to live surrounded by animals and spirits since the church hates them. Shuddering, she recalls her father has the same color hair and eyes as the royal family. In her past life, he might readily hand her over to the church. But to her shock, he declares he refuses. She is his and Amelia's beautiful, precious child. The priest warns if he keeps such an inauspicious child in his home, she might bring misfortune upon her siblings' marriages and futures. He shoots back, anyone deluded by such superstitions is unfit to be son Gilbert's wife or Lydia's husband. The priest smiles and says he understands, he only offered his advice. 200 years ago, the kingdom of Olivanus was struck by disaster. At that time, 1/3 of the population died and the presiding Holy Royal Family was executed in a coup d'état. The one who led the coup d'état against the Holy Family was House Farnese. House Farnese was the original branch family of the royal family. The Farnesian dynasty has maintained power for the past 200 years. The current head of House Farnese is the current king, Luria's grandfather and Grauff's father. The founder of the Farnesian dynasty was Luria's second cousin. That first king successfully removed the Church of the One God as the national religion. Because he believed that the Holy Royal Family and the Church of the One God had offended and angered the spirits. But the ban on the faith couldn't last forever. Fear of the spirit spread among the citizens and nobles. The Church of the One God's doctrine of spirit should belong under human control in the name of God began to gain traction. Biding their time for 200 years, the Church of the One God garnished believers, strengthened their influence and began invading politics again. On the way back in the carriage, the priest mutters through gritted teeth, how infuriating. He isn't even the king, just a useless spare. Lost the throne, given the title of Archduke and barely above a commoner, yet he dares look down on the church. He thinks the second prince should have taken a neutral stance towards the church, yet why did he decide to treat him like that when he visited? He believes he was being kind enough to take that child off his hands, but he glared at him like he was some kind of trash, so he won't let that stand. The carriage jolts to a halt and the priest snaps at the driver, demanding to know why they've stopped and ordering him to keep going, but the man says that something is in the way. Peering out the window, the priest's eyes widen at the sight of a cow, twice the size of a horse. He barks for the driver to steer around it, only to be told the horses won't obey. Irritated, he orders him to deal with it. He's the driver, after all, but before another word can leave his mouth, the massive beast lunges, slamming into the carriage with terrifying force. In an instant, the priest is thrown outside. He scurries across the ground in panic, certain he's about to be devoured. In desperation, he cries out for God's mercy, but instead, the birds latch onto him, tear his robes apart, and fling him back onto the ground. The archbishop's mind was so overwhelmed with fear that he hadn't considered that these animals could use magic. The cow, boar, birds and goat were all guardian beasts. Suddenly he looked shocked and mumbled, "Is this a revelation? Has this been God's will?" The archbishop began to feel a strong affinity towards the spirits. He felt like he understood God's wishes through the gold. God existed but had absolutely no influence on the world. In other words, anything that resembled divinity in this world was practically all the work of spirits. That was why it was ironic that many of the higher-ups of the Church of the One God had a strong affinity with spirits. The cow glared at him and said no to torment Luria and to protect her. That was his mission and his destiny. He said as by his will he will not lay a hand on Lady Luria. He swore that on his life. The gravely injured archbishop was discovered inside the forest the following day. Since then, rumors spread that the archbishop had changed. He became merciful, kind to the citizens and thoughtful. He began to preach that spirits were God's angels and he secretly worked to ensure Luria's safety. Meanwhile, Luria thinks the archbishop annoyed her but she learned a lot. The Church of the One God is still around, so she needs to be careful. Her previous life, Louisa, is being referred to as the Witch of Calamity. So she should hide her identity as her reincarnation. She apparently has a brother and sister, although she hasn't seen them. Her father is called His Highness, which means that he is royalty. Based on the color of his hair and eyes, she can assume that it is still the same royal family in control. Her nanny sees the troubled look on her face and picks her up to change her diaper. Her father shows up as well, taking her from the nanny and exclaims Luria is as cute as always. No, she's gotten cuter. She looks up at her father with an apologetic gaze. He asks what is the matter, she's so quiet. The nanny guesses perhaps she is exhausted from meeting a stranger during the christening. He admits yes, someone said some nasty things, but her papa is going to protect her. Luria tried not to think about it but he's really nice. Her father, in her past life, was also royalty. That means that there are both good and bad people with the same colored hair and eyes as for her father. It's not fair to judge him for all the mean things all the silver-haired blue-eyed people did to her for 10 years. Mumbling something, she falls asleep on his chest. He murmurs so cute. He then turns to the butler and instructs him to call Amalia. Moments later, she comes in and crouches to peer under the crib, calling out for Leonardo. He frowns in confusion at the name so she explains that it's the puppy's name. But the puppy won't come out. It likely thinks she'll take him away. Grauf tells her the baby was given the name Luria. Is that so, she asks, saying it is a good name. She notices he doesn't look happy and asks him what happened. He admits the archbishop called Luria auspicious. Surprised, she asks was it because of the Witch of Calamity, Louisa? He replies yeah, he said that baby girls with red hair and red eyes born in the royal family are inauspicious so he should hand her over to the church. She blurts out that she cannot believe it, insisting he obviously before trailing off. He cuts in, saying of course he refused because they cannot trust them. The story of the Witch of Calamity Loisa was well known among the citizens. But it was a cover-up story the Holy Royal Family fabricated with the Church of the One God before they were eradicated. It told the story of how Louisa, evil at birth, went out of control as she grew up. The church lost their headquarters, their pope and their high-ranking clergymen in the fight to defeat the harbinger of destruction. However, Louisa's curse only strengthened with her death and brought immense disaster to the country. Grauf remarks only fools would believe that convenient story that paints the Church of the One God and royal family in a good light. Amalia agrees. She believes the violence against the spirits by the church brought God's and the spirits' wrath upon them. Amalia understood the truth of those events. However, the campaign to alter historical fact was still deeply rooted at the heart of the Church of the One God. Their claims, the true events, sounded too much in favor of the current regime, House Farnese. And in order to justify the destruction of the Holy Royal Family in a coup d'état and the weakened influence of the Church of the One God, House Farnese had come up with that ridiculous story. Amalia murmurs if only they read the documents more closely, they would see, and calls them idiots. The documents were diaries and journals written by impartial nobles inside and outside the palace as they recorded events far before the coup d'état that showed no favoritism to House Farnese, the Holy Royal Family or the Church. Grauf guesses they wouldn't know since the citizens aren't taught history in school, and it's lamentable that there are even some among the educated nobles who believe those lies. He then says the church may try to do something to Luria. Amalia asks what could that be? Would they kidnap her? He doubts they will do something that drastic to royalty, but they might spread rumors and such. He thinks to himself, not just rumors, they will likely try to apply some political pressure as well. Turning to his wife, he suggests they should watch what they say and do out in public from now on. And they also need to advise Gilbert and Lydia. Amalia says she will also instruct the servants to be careful. The following day after the christening, Gilbert and Lydia watch their sibling with little smiles on their faces. She wakes up and looks at them curiously. Gilbert is the first one to introduce himself as her older brother, then Lydia introduces herself as her sister. Gilbert admits Lydia and he has been wanting to meet her. But there is a rule that inhibits siblings from seeing the baby until after the christening. If siblings get near a suckling baby before the christening, the blessings of spirits bestowed by the mother will end up transferring to the siblings. Luria remembers Roa telling her it was a superstition. Lydia turns to the nanny and asks if she can hold her, but the nanny gently suggests not while standing up, explaining that the baby's neck isn't strong enough yet. As they settle on the sofa, the nanny places the baby in Gilbert's arms. She guides him to support her bottom with his left hand and bend his right arm so her head rests securely on it. He nudges his face against hers and says it's her big brother. Make sure she eats lots so she can grow up big and strong. Then he passes the baby to Lydia, who cradles her gently. Smiling, she says he is her big sister. And because she is her little sister, she is going to spoil her, take care of her and teach her so many things. That's what big sisters are for. She also lets her know if anyone bullies her, her older sister will protect her. But, Gilbert adds, protecting Luria is his duty as her older brother. Luria is glad her big brother and sister are such nice people. Later, she notices the puppy staring at her through the crib bars. She thinks, hopefully he's not dangling there, though that's exactly what he's doing. In the next moment, he leaps onto the crib. Just then, Amalia arrives, scolding Leonardo that he cannot jump in there and lifts him out. Luria cries out but Amalia mistakes it for hunger and later feeds her milk. The nanny concludes the young miss must have cried because she was hungry. Amalia remarks that, compared to Gilbert and Lydia, she hardly ever cries, which worried her. But the nanny reassures her that since the baby is drinking plenty of breast milk, there's nothing to worry about. Later, she plays with the spirits while Leonardo chases after them. Suddenly two masked men climb through the window. The nanny screams, warning that there are intruders, but they strike her and she collapses to the floor. Luria realizes these are kidnappers. Without hesitation, Leonardo leaps in front of her. One of the men mutters what an annoying dog and draws his blade. Leonardo jumps at him, biting his mask. The man curses and tries to activate magic to turn the puppy to ash, but nothing happens, his power fails. The other man orders him to just kill it with the knife. As he raises the knife, Luria screams, unleashing her own magic, which sends both attackers flying backward. The door bursts open and her father storms in. He releases his power, shards scattering around the intruders, and yells how dare they hurt his daughter. He rushes to her side, checking if she's alright. Later, both men are tied together as they tend to the injured nanny. Leonardo, hurt on the cheek, still curls up protectively against Luria. Luria prays that the puppy's cut gets healed quickly. She also prays that the nanny's wounds also get healed quickly. And with that, she summons her magic. Grauf stares in disbelief, wondering if he imagined it. The nanny slowly gets up and he asks about her injuries, but she waves it off, saying the pain is gone. She tries to move, but he cautions her against it, warning that she's hurt her head. She insists she's fine. He exhales, admitting his gratitude for her effort to protect Gloria and swearing by his name to always remember her loyalty. The summoned healer approaches, and Grauf urges her to examine her immediately. After checking, the healer says there are no wounds at all. He murmurs that cannot be, but the healer insists she cannot find a single injury. Grauf presses further, what about internal brain damage? The healer says she naturally checked for that too. Even the bloodstains are mere splatter. Both Luria and the puppy are completely unharmed as well. Just before Luria fell asleep, she subconsciously cast healing magic. She hadn't realized it herself, but she instantly healed all the wounds on the puppy and nanny. The spirits gather around her, murmuring that she must have been scared, while the Spirit King watches Leonardo with appreciation for protecting Luria. He says he's an admirable Gagu, a fine guardian beast. The spirit echoes Gagu, so he says yes, as Lady Luria has been calling it, Gagu. The Spirit King then tells him to have rest. He was healed by Lady Luria, but that did not replenish his stamina. The Spirit King admits to other spirits he is impressed Lady Luria managed to cancel the magic the bandit was trying to cast. The spirit asks what does that mean? He explains in order to use magic, normal magicians have to borrow the power of spirits too young to have any ego. These spirits have no ego and thus lend their power as asked. Those spirits without ego heard Lady Luria shout. Moreover, right after casting wind magic to blow the bandit away, she cast healing magic. Luria did all of that subconsciously, being both human and spirit. She is far too powerful. These spirits asks him if he's angry. He replies he's not angry with them but he already advised them against lending their power to her as she's still only a baby. Borrowing power from spirits and casting magic is similar to a human eating and going for a run. Humans need the energy from food to run. However, even if he eats while running, he can't necessarily go on forever. Eating and digesting is how they convert energy into stamina and move around. Just as food is like the power from spirits, running is like casting magic. Even if the spirits continue to supply her with power, she will still be exhausted after casting magic. Yet Lady Luria cast magic without relying on their power. They begin squabbling among themselves over who will give her power but he interrupts firmly, insisting they must not grant her an unlimited supply. Only spirits mature enough to control their output are allowed or it will be dangerous. The Spirit King then kisses her on the cheek, gently telling her to grow up strong and healthy. Later, Amalia rushes into Luria's room, scooping her up and crying, while her siblings trail behind in shock. In the dungeon, Grauf frowns, furious, and orders his guards to check the infiltration routes and plug any holes in their security. Later, in his study, he mutters that he can only imagine Luria must have used magic. Leonardo and the nanny should have been injured but they are unscathed. The healer said it was only blood splatter but looking at the bandits' bodies clearly tells a different story. The miraculous removal of the curse on Amalia after giving birth was also likely the reason. He realizes Luria really is a special child. As Grauf walks down the hallway, he glances into her room and finds Amalia with Gilbert and Lydia inside. They try calling Leonardo over but he ignores them, even when Amalia waves a piece of jerky. It isn't until Luria mumbles in her sleep that he rushes straight to her side. Gilbert's eyes light up as if something clicks, and when Lydia asks what he has figured out, he only tells her to watch. The moment he calls out Gugu, Leonardo darts over, and Gilbert mutters in triumph that he was right. His mother asks what is going on so he explains Leonardo thinks his name is Gugu. Amalia calls him Gugu and tells him to come and Leonardo immediately hops onto her lap. Lydia tries it too and he rushes over, but when she switches to Leonardo and calls him again, he doesn't respond. Outside the door, Grauf bursts into laughter. Amalia walks over and asks what he's doing there, and he answers that it's nothing, he was just watching the children have fun. When he steps inside, Gilbert remarks that he could have come in and watched up close, then urges him to look. Leonardo truly believes his name is Gugu. Grauf praises him with a curt good job, then calls the puppy by that name himself, thanking him for protecting Luria and urging him to keep up the good work. He then turns to face his family, his tone shifting and tells them he has something important to discuss about Luria. Luria will likely stand out with her red hair and eyes, especially as she is the daughter of their lineage that produced the Witch of Calamity. That's why they must not tell others what Luria does or what kind of child she is. Based on the attacker's story and the curse placed on Amalia, Luria's uniqueness is not something that will be well received. It wouldn't be strange if there are some who will besmirch her as the reincarnation of the Witch of Calamity. He recalls in fact, the Archbishop of the Church of the One God even asked him to entrust her to them. Gilbert asks even the most trivial things. He replies it's probably difficult for them to determine what should and what shouldn't be said. And it's not because they're too young that he's not telling them more. It is because he doesn't know who ordered the attack. Lydia guesses it was a political decision. He says correct and adds that as long as they don't know who the enemy is, they should limit the amount of information that gets out. The children nod in understanding and he pulls them into his arms, murmuring that they're such good kids. Later, he stands beside the crib with Amalia and says Luria is a child blessed by God, thinking so much so that hugging her was enough to remove the curse plaguing Amalia. He bets God removed the curse as a reward for giving birth to the adorable Luria. Right after the incident, there was blood on Gugu's fur but he was unharmed as if his grave injuries were healed with magic. In an instant, she used powerful magic that even the country's best healer would have trouble casting. He realizes Luria is God's chosen, The girl is adored by the spirits and he must conceal his beloved daughter's extraordinary powers. Meanwhile, in Varroa district, the priest lies on his bed when his junior approaches, lamenting that the attack on Miss Luria was a tragedy and admitting he cannot believe they failed. Saul's hand suddenly trembles and his eyes harden. He calls the words blasphemy against their God, glaring at him and demanding repentance. He reminds him that protecting Lady Luria is God's will, something he has already made clear. The junior priest stammers that he hadn't thought he was serious. Saul asks if he dares hold opinions about God's glorious will. Panic-stricken, the junior insists he would never, that he had only misunderstood, that he simply hadn't thought it was God's will to guard Luria. Saul says then he will repeat himself, then he shall say it again, it is their God's will. Does he understand? He pushes himself up but pain shoots through him. The junior priest quickly covers his nose, muttering that the room reeks of blood, asking if his wounds have opened again. Saul doesn't care, he welcomes it, calling the blood proof that he is loved by their God. The junior priest says he understands but begs at least to be allowed to apply salve and change the bandages. If left alone, he warns, the blood will stain the holy cathedral. Reluctantly, Saul agrees. As the younger man tends his wounds, he asks who the utter buffoon was that ordered the attack on Lady Luria. The junior priest admits there is no definitive proof but it is highly likely. Saul already knows who he is talking about. Even among the archbishops, he's one of the fervent extremists set on suppressing worship of spirits. And if they consider the movement of private forces and the preparations for an attack, things line up. Once they discovered that Lady Luria has the same colored hair and eyes as the Witch of Calamity, he wouldn't put kidnapping and assassination past them. Yet being unable to stop the attack, he counts it as his greatest mistake. Dramatically, he bows his head, pleading with the Lord for forgiveness and mercy upon his foolish child. The man in front of him can only stare in stunned silence. He then declares that they must extend their sympathies to the Duke's family. The man hesitates, warning that such an act might brand him a criminal. He dismisses the concern, insisting it does not matter. What matters is that His Grace learns the name of the malicious archbishop who orchestrated the attack, even if it will not be enough to secure His Grace's trust. If the Duke believes this to be nothing more than an internal quarrel within the church, so be it. He then decides to compose a letter. Along with their sympathies, he must also ask for forgiveness for his disrespectful behavior during the christening. After he is done with his letter, he tells him to deliver it. He says there are too many enemies of God in the Church of the One God. How lamentable all that is left is to exterminate those who oppose God. Immediately after, internal conflict arose within the Church of the One God. Within a mere 2 years, 3 extremist archbishops were demoted to lay priests and sent off to a small church in the remote outskirts. Not only that, one of the archbishops unexpectedly passed away in a mysterious accident. That archbishop was the mastermind behind the attack on Luria. All the nobles and high-ranking clergy knew that Grand Duke Grauf intervened in the church's internal conflict. Despite this knowledge, no one spoke out of fear and treated it like an open secret. 3 days after the bandit attack, as Luria awakens, Leonardo whimpers and rubs against her, eager for attention. The nanny arrives, her hand gently caressing his fur as she murmurs her gratitude for alerting her that Miss Luria has awoken. Luria smiles, thinking they now let him stay with her likely because he protected her during that attack. Her father's voice echoes in her mind that loyalty never goes unrewarded. Just then Lydia appears, announcing that Luria is awake and remarking how cute she looks, though Luria thinks her big sister is just as cute, and when Lydia declares she will read her a book, Luria soon drifts to sleep to the sound of her voice. When she wakes again, her father is by her side and she thinks if Daddy is here, the puppy is roaming the mansion and has left her under Daddy's protection. Then he picks her up with a smile, calling her a cutie. Amalia stands nearby holding the puppy, with a grumble on her face until Grauf asks what is wrong, and she sets the puppy down, points at the corner, and tells Gugu to use the toilet there and nowhere else, which makes Grauf ask if he has done it again, and clutching her head, Amalia groans that the puppy must be trying to mark his territory since she has already counted several spots and fears there may be more. He doesn't use the toilet she set up in her room, so she had to relent and install one in Luria's room. Grauf asks, still no results. She replies, unfortunately so. She supposes they have no choice but to keep him outside. Panic-stricken, she whirls toward him and in her own childish language, insists he use the toilet or else be put out. She tells him to use the toilet on top of the sand, and he immediately dashes over and does it right in front of them, leaving everyone stunned. Amalia exclaims that he finally understands, while the maid runs a hand through his fur and praises him as a smart one. Later when he hops onto Luria's crib, the nanny watches fondly, remarking that he has been a great help, and just like that, 8 months pass. As the maid and Amalia step inside, they find Gugu and Luria racing around the room. The maid kneels to slip slippers onto her feet, and Amalia remarks that Luria is so energetic, to which the maid replies that it is no wonder, since she drank plenty of her milk. And just then Luria pauses, fixes her gaze on Gugu, and blurts out, "Biggie." At 8 months old, she is capable of some speech. She then tells Gugu the nanny is off today, she has a child the same age as her. That's why she doesn't come every day. When she was just born, the nanny entrusted her child to another servant while she cared for her. To compensate for that lost time, she's now allowed to spend more time with her child. If they had kept the nanny's child here, there was the risk that she might be involved if she's attacked again. Hence why mother instructed the nanny to not bring her child, and also why she's never met the nanny's child. Though she does want to meet her one day. Her gaze drifts to the window and she leans close to Gugu, whispering in his ear that she wants to explore outside. While Amalia is busy conversing, Luria and Gugu slip out of the room, but in the hallway they run straight into Gilbert, who is startled to find that she has crawled all the way there. He scoops her up, though she thrashes in his arms, still eager to explore, and he tells her that if she wants to explore, they should do it together, since it will be safer that way, and he even pats Gugu's head, praising him for watching over her before gently scolding Luria that the floor is filthy from everyone's shoes, and since she is always licking her hands, it is dangerous to crawl there, which makes her mumble that she doesn't, and he says maybe she doesn't, but it is still dirty. Then he asks if coming all the way out here means she truly wants to explore, and when she nods, he agrees they shall explore, but only with mother's permission, since she must already be worried by her sudden disappearance. When he carries her back inside and pushes open the door, Amalia is shocked to see Luria in Gilbert's arms, rushing to hug him in relief. Gilbert blushes and Luria thinks good for him. Then Amalia asks in disbelief how Luria managed to leave the room. She was sure the door was closed. Gilbert calmly replies that Gugu must have opened it. They all turn to look at Gugu, but Luria quickly steps in front of him, insisting he isn't bad, that she is the bad one. Gilbert tells her she will only worry everyone if she slips out of the room on her own, so next time she must make sure to tell her brother, though she protests that he isn't always there. And when he glances toward their mother and suggests installing a gate, her mouth falls open in protest, declaring they don't need one, yet he calmly replies that she will escape if she can. And though she promises she won't, he repeats that a gate really is needed, which makes her pout and insist her promise is enough, but he only sits back on the sofa, eyeing her steadily and telling her that pouting won't help, then softens the blow by adding that her big brother will take her on plenty of walks instead. When she mumbles a doubtful really, he assures her of course, just not when he has other things to do, and at that, her face lights up in a beaming smile. He then faces his mother and says Luria promised to not leave the room without letting someone, so can he walk around with her until she gets bigger? Amalia replies as long as it is inside the house, of course. He then takes both the dog and Luria, and the next time they play together in the room while the nurse watches, remarking that Luria is getting very good at crawling. Just as she says it, Luria reaches the door and bangs on it, declaring she wants to go outside, but the nanny gently reminds her that they already went for a walk this morning, and though Luria mumbles again that she wants to go out, the nanny only remarks that she is quick to pick up words and that her little one can only say Gu and Ga. Luria then mumbles that she wants to meet her. The nanny mistakes it for hunger and begins feeding her milk instead, and later, Lydia runs her hand through Gugu's fur, praising him warmly for being such a good boy and for watching over Luria so well. Luria calls out to her older sister and exclaims that she wants to go outside, and Lydia turns to the nanny to ask if she can take her out of the room. The nanny agrees but reminds her she must accompany them. As they walk down the hall, Lydia asks where Luria wants to go, and Luria answers simply, "Father," which makes the nanny guess she means the master, so they stop at his study door and knock. And when he opens it, Lydia explains that Luria said she wanted to see him, so she brought her here. And at once the little girl stretches out her arms, calling to him until he quickly scoops her up with a smile, telling her she is always so cute, while also giving Gugu a fond pat on the head. And later, on their way back, Luria catches sight of Gilbert through the window, training with his sword. She begins to say she wants to see them, but Lydia gently tells her she cannot bother them, then asks if she would like to learn swordsmanship with Gilbert. Luria eagerly replies that she does, but Lydia reminds her that girls are not taught swordsmanship and that even her big sister was never trained. She says it doesn't matter, thinking if she can train her body she might be able to fight against the bad guys. She decides that when she is bigger she will train alongside Gugu. Soon they arrive at the library, where Lydia announces she will read her a picture book. Luria thinks knowledge is another way to protect oneself. Lydia turns the page to show her a picture of a goat, and just like that, 3 years pass since Luria was reborn, and at 3 years old she is finally allowed to leave the room by herself. By now Gugu has also grown much larger. Hey guys, Zenith interjecting here. I hope you guys are enjoying the video. If it isn't too much to ask, it would mean the world if you could either hype the video, like it, or press subscribe. Either way, thank you for being here. Lydia has Luria in her lap as the little girl looks at the picture book and points at the words, asking what they say. Lydia reads them aloud. Mammalia, Carnivora, Felidae, Panthera. Luria frowns and mumbles that it is too difficult to read. Lydia explains everything to her and tells her that if she ever wants to read books again, she is free to ask. Just then, Gilbert walks in. Luria's gaze instantly lands on the wooden sword tied to his waist, and her eyes light up. She quickly says she wants to see it. Gilbert blinks and asks what? His training sword? She beams and nods. He tells her he will show her if his instructor allows it. Luria thanks him, and even the dog gets excited. Later, outside in the garden, she sits on the dog's back while it runs around happily. Gilbert tells her he is about to start intense training, so she has to keep her distance. Luria promises she will not get close. He pats her head and calls her a smart girl, making her smile proudly. As she watches him train, she grows sleepy, and before long, she dozes off against the dog's fluffy fur. But suddenly, movement stirs around her. When she opens her eyes, animals surround her from all sides. Gilbert walks over and asks what is going on. Then his eyes land on a prairie dog standing nearby, making strange poses with an oddly creepy smile. He jumps back in horror. Meanwhile, Luria and the dog stare at it with sparkling, impressed eyes. Gilbert asks why there is a prairie dog in the garden. Luria hugs it happily and says she loves it when the garden is full of animals. The prairie dog and the birds are guardian beasts. Since they are not allowed inside the mansion, they wait outside. Later, inside the mansion, Luria sits on her father's lap and brightly announces that she wants to learn swordsmanship. Her father looks confused and asks why so suddenly. Gilbert explains that perhaps she wants to copy him after watching his training. Luria looks at her father seriously and says the world is full of swords, so she needs to protect herself. Her father admits that is true, but reminds her that she is surrounded by guards and will be safe. But then he remembers the recent incident. They do not know when another attack might happen. Luria then declares with a fierce look that swords are not enough. She wants to learn magic too. Her father's eyes instantly harden. He firmly tells her no. The sharpness in his voice makes her flinch. He composes himself and apologizes, explaining that magic is too dangerous for a child's body. Luria remembers casually using large-scale magic when she is only 5 in her past life without any problems. But then her father adds that using magic too early can even stop her growth. Luria freezes in shock. Gilbert adds that he also only starts learning magic recently, and she has to wait until she turns 13. Luria nods stiffly, deciding she definitely does not want to stop growing. Her father then asks if she still wants to learn swordsmanship. She nods firmly and says she does. Amalia asks why not let her. After a moment, her father agrees. Luria's face immediately brightens when he says he will ask Gilbert's instructor to teach her as well. Excitedly, she starts listing all the things she wants to learn, letters and books too. After that, Luria studies reading in the mornings and practices swordsmanship in the afternoons. Her teacher looks at her in admiration, amazed by her memory. She can even solve single-digit arithmetic. Luria receives education until the age of 5 in her past life, and Roa teaches her arithmetic. Inside, she grins to herself with a sly smile, thinking she plays the role of a child prodigy perfectly. Later, Gilbert's instructor stands before her with a wooden sword and announces they will begin with practice swings. He shows her how to hold the sword properly. But soon, Luria stands there holding the wooden sword. Awkwardly, looking confused. Beside her, Gugu happily plays with a stick, jumping around in excitement. Then her gaze shifts toward Gilbert. Unlike her, Gilbert receives full attention. The instructor corrects everything, his posture, his footwork, the timing of his steps, every movement. Meanwhile, Luria stands there, lifting one leg a little and awkwardly raising her wooden sword. Like this? She asks. But then she lets out a long sigh and closes her eyes. She is being completely ignored. When she fought in her past life, she faced great danger. If she had practiced swordsmanship, footwork, she probably would have dodged their attacks much easier. With a second's notice, even a tenth of a second of an opening, she could have attacked with magic. A tenth of a second could be the deciding factor between life and death. When she gets bigger and can use magic, this will definitely be useful. Luria looks at Gugu, who places a paw on her shoulder and watches her with a nervous smile. She hugs him and tells him she is okay. But then the instructor suddenly calls her over. Her body stiffens. Is he angry because she stopped practicing swings? She quickly blurts out that she got carried away and is sorry. But instead of scolding her, the instructor looks at her with awe. He tells her she has an excellent stance. The way she moves looks like she is actually facing an enemy. Her movements have character. Luria smiles awkwardly, caught between joy and nervousness, and asks if it really does. Half a year later, Luria raises her wooden sword with much more confidence. She swings it cleanly before looking at Gugu. She asks if he thinks she has gotten better. Gugu barks proudly in approval. But then a sudden gust of cold wind brushes past them. The birds fluff up and shiver. Luria pauses. In her past life, she stayed in a barn with only a set of racks as clothes. She felt like she would die from the cold winter, but she used spirit magic to warm up the room. The goats surrounded her with their warmth, so she managed to survive. It was all thanks to those goats. Looking at the shivering birds now, she asks if they are cold. Luria tells them she will ask Mother if they can stay in her room. Inside the mansion, Amalia sits in her room, reading papers when a knock comes. She looks up and asks if something is wrong. The door opens. And there stands Luria covered in birds. They are on her shoulders, on her head, on her arms. Luria tells her mother she has brought the birdies because they are cold. Amalia looks nervous and says, so this is what it is about. Luria tells her that winter is too cold for the birdies, so she wants them to stay in her room. She lets out a sigh and says, but they have an issue with that. She says, birds structurally cannot control when they excrete and some species have powdered down that produces feather dust. It might make her sick. The bird sitting on Luria's head blinks innocently, like it has never committed a crime in its life. Luria thinks to herself, but if she accidentally leaves the window open and then they happen to enter, that will work. However, her mother knows her very well as she crosses her arms and tells her she hopes she's not thinking that if she keeps one window open and let them enter, she can get away with it. She instantly flinches and says she is not. Amalia smiles and says that is wonderful. Then Amalia looks outside the window and suggests building birdhouses outside the mansion instead. That way, they can stay warm. Luria's eyes instantly light up. Really? Her mother says of course she will try to find some way to let them inside if she doesn't. Luria instantly turns down the accusation, that is not true. And then asks if the birdhouse can be heated. Amalia says she will ask the carpenter. Luria brightens. Then she picks up the prairie dog and presents him to Amalia like evidence. What about this one? The prairie dog gives Amalia his best innocent face. Amalia blinks and says a prairie dog. Luria nods and replies yes. It can hold its poop. And it has no feather dust. Amalia says that is true, but can it be toilet trained? The dog crosses his arms, looking smug. Luria replies, it says it can. Amalia wonders if it really said that. Can she trust that she can take care of it? She promises she can. Amalia asks that she can train it to use the toilet. She replies yes. Amalia lets out a sigh and says, okay then, she guesses she can keep it. Luria hugs the prairie dog happily. But Amalia quickly adds that it must be cleaned first. A maid steps forward and carefully takes the prairie dog. Luria thanks her mother. Then she says Amalia knows a lot about animals. Amalia smiles and admits she knows a little. Luria silently decides she will ask about goats next time. She then tells her mother she is going to help wash the dog. Outside, the maid prepares warm water. Luria stands at the doorway with Gugu, just watching. Amalia notices and asks if she is not joining. Luria admits she does not want to get in the way. Amalia points out but she wanted to wash him, didn't she? Luria hesitates and nods. Amalia walks over to the maid and asks her to let Luria help. Luria washes the prairie dog while Amalia guides her. Her mother keeps instructing her to be careful around the face and not to get soap in the ears or eyes. She replies, "Okay." Her mother points out his paws are covered with dirt. Prairie dogs dig holes after all. After she washes him thoroughly, she has him wrapped around a towel and he looks brand new. She hugs him tightly and says it is so cute. Then Amalia asks why she does not name him. Luria thinks. Amalia casually suggests Leonardo. Luria repeats Leonardo, looking horrified by even the aspect of it. The prairie dog lets out a squeak. Luria perks up and says, "How about squeak?" Amalia immediately objects. That is just the sound he makes, doesn't she think Leonardo sounds better? Luria says but it fits him better. So Amalia proposes they let him choose. They place him on the floor and both stand a little far, calling out to him. But then Luria notices Amalia is holding nuts. Mother is bribing him with nuts. The prairie dog looks completely torn. His tiny head keeps turning back and forth between them. Amalia laughs and says he is debating which name he will choose. Luria looks like she can't believe the nerve of her mother and mutters he is just interested in the nuts. The prairie dog's eyes suddenly sharpen. Decision made. He leaps straight into Luria's arms. Amalia says she did not call him over, but he came to her. Perhaps he doesn't care about either name. She replies that is not true. Leonardo is a no-go. But then the prairie dog starts reaching for Amalia's nuts. Amalia pulls them away and tells him no nerds for him. Or does he want his name to be Nerds? The prairie dog freezes in horror. Then his eyes water. Luria asks if he wants nuts. He nods desperately and squeaks. So she gives him some. As he happily munches, she thinks for a moment. Then says, "How about Caro?" The prairie dog squeaks. Amalia says it looks like he likes it. And since Luria is his owner, the decision is hers. Luria hugs him tightly and welcomes Caro. The next morning, when Luria wakes up, Caro stands on the headboard of her bed like a tiny guard, looking around with an alert gaze. She pats his head and asks if he is keeping watch. Caro puffs up proudly. Outside, she does her sword practice. After finishing, she looks around and realizes Caro is missing. She asks the animals where he is. Every single one avoids eye contact. She realizes they want to play hide and seek. She points ahead and tells Gugu to sniff him out. Soon, they find a freshly dug hole. Luria kneels and looks inside with Gugu telling Caro to come. Caro crawls out covered head to toe in dirt. Luria stares at him. She says he dug a hole, will she get in trouble? But then she looks around and says they are in a blind spot, no one will notice, right? Gugu is holding Caro like a culprit caught directly from the scene. She then adds now they need to secretly get him cleaned up, they might get in trouble if he's covered in dirt. They should secretly use the bath in her room. Inside her room, she sneaks into the bath. She opens the tap, hoping for the hot water but cold water blasts straight into her face. She gasps and stumbles back, soaked. Caro also Gugu also gets splashed. Marion rushes in and quickly shuts it off. She looks at her with a relieved face and says thank you, she saved them. Marion asks her what was she doing. It can be difficult to operate, so she must not use it herself. She apologizes and softly says Gugu and Caro are not bad. She is the bad one. Marion smiles gently and says she is not angry. Then she asks what Luria is trying to do. Luria explains she is sweaty and Caro is dirty, so she thought they can bathe together. Marion says she understands and asks her to allow her to help. She helps Luria into one bath and places Caro in his own little bucket. Marion gently washes Luria and says that soon she will not be able to care for her like this anymore and she will miss it. Luria says but her baby misses her more, right? And admits she wants to meet her baby. Marion tells her she may meet her whenever she wishes as long as the Lord and Lady give permission. The child that a nanny is hired to look after is called her charge, to separate them from the nanny's own children. Marion is raising her, but she's not her child. She is her charge. The nanny's child is expected to become the charge's confidant, so employers look at personality and intelligence when choosing nannies. In fact, her brother and sister are often with their nanny's children, but she has yet to meet her nanny's child. As Marion dries her hair, she smiles softly at her and tells her she is sure the two will meet one day and she will also come see them. She gives her a big smile and says, yeah, she loves Marion. Marion softly says she loves her too. Her beloved nanny Marion was released from her duties and returned home 3 days after that. In the morning, Karo is standing on the headboard again, looking around. Suddenly, Luria reaches out and pulls him into her arms. She wishes him good morning and tells him he does not need to keep watch all the time. He needs to sleep too if he wants to grow up big. She points at Gugu, who is sleeping peacefully beside her, and says that he got this big because he sleeps so much. Once Karo is that big, he can fight battles too. She quietly admits that she wants to grow bigger as well. Just then, Gugu wakes up and lets out a long yawn. Luria smiles and wishes him good morning too. Then she says they should start their usual routine. Now that she is 5 years old, she begins her stretches. It is something she learned from the swordsmanship instructor. If she keeps doing it, her body will move more easily, and fighting will become easier. Later she watches from the window as the birds suddenly fly toward her window. She looks at them and greets them with a good morning, happy to see them. But one owl flaps its wings and quickly flies down. She leans out the window and looks down. There, she sees a chicken shivering badly. It is bigger than the one in her book. The owl keeps flapping, urging her to look closer. Luria narrows her eyes and notices something. Its wing and foot look injured. Without thinking, she climbs out and jumps down. Behind her, Karo and Gugu freeze in shock. Gugu barks loudly, but Luria waves at him and tells him she is fine. She says she is stronger now. She realizes he wants her to get on his back next time when going down. Luria hugs him, and says she will. Then she kneels beside the chicken and gently holds it. She asks if it is okay. The chicken looks weak and does not respond. She knows it must hurt him a lot. It looks like the bone of his right wing and his right foot are broken. She suddenly spreads her arms in front of him with a big smile and tells the pain to go away. The chicken stares at her, startled. Luria tells him it is a magic charm. It cannot fix the injury, but it can help with the pain. Then she says she will take care of him. She asks Gugu to carry the chicken to her mother's room. On the way, she wonders how it even got into the garden. The book says chickens cannot fly high enough to reach the mansion. Did the other birds bring it? She pats it gently and says even if they did, she is not upset. She knocks on her mother's door. Amalia opens it and looks at her, then at the chicken. She tells her mother he is hurt, so she wants to take care of him. Her mother takes it from her, saying she can take a look at it and casually remarks she thought she wanted to eat him for dinner. The bird jumps in horror, while Luria replies, of course not. She then says she doesn't see any injuries though. Luria says this cannot be right. She tells the chicken she is going to touch it. It might hurt, but it needs to stay still. But when she touches it, everything feels normal. She looks confused. Amalia asks if she is sure it was not her imagination. Luria looks at the chicken and asks if it was hurt earlier. The chicken stays quiet. Amalia says that if there are no injuries, then it should be fine. Then Amalia asks if she plans to keep it. Luria hesitates, then admits she did bring it inside. Amalia says she did pick him up. Amalia says exactly, it is also too late to make him into a meal now. She then looks at her mother and asks if she is fine with it. Her mother says she supposes it cannot be helped. She jumps with a cheerful hooray along with Gugu, Karo and the chicken. Then she asks what she should name it. Amalia instantly suggests Leonardo. Luria immediately refuses. She thinks for a moment. She then thinks about it, he does pluck pluck sound. She then says, Corco, his name will be Corco. After the breakfast, she holds her tummy and then asks the bird if he enjoyed his breakfast and says since he was able to take a bath, does he remember where the bathroom is? He nods, she then jumps onto her bed. Now that she is relaxed, he is getting sleepy. And then she dozes off. The night before Corco, who was still nameless at the time, was taken into Luria's custody. Corco was in a forest around 1 hour away by foot from Luria's residence. Corco, the guardian beast, was on his way to see the special spirit king Luria when he stopped by the forest. As a chicken, Corco can hardly see his surroundings, however, his senses firmly grasped a sorcerer crawling in the woods. Even though he couldn't see at night, being the guardian beast, he could see magic and spells. The sorcerer was eating the spirits. It's the duty of the guardian beast to protect the spirits from the sorcerers. The sorcerer is a horrifying creature. It has 2 heads, 3 eyes, and skin that looks like it is melting off its body. Just looking at it makes the spirits tremble. They say this is the one they saw before. The scary one. Even the chicken freezes in fear. The sorcerer suddenly notices them and starts climbing the tree. Korko reacts just then. He jumps at it and crashes into its body, making it lose balance for a second. But the sorcerer quickly swings its claw at him. The chicken jumps up into the air and dodges it. Then he dives down and bites into its shoulder. The sorcerer screams in anger. Korko pushes off and runs. The sorcerer chases after him. But while running, the chicken suddenly turns and slashes him with his claw. A cut opens across the sorcerer's body. Suddenly its flesh melts and turns into miasma. The black smoke crawls into the trunk of the tree and disappears. Korko drops to the ground, breathing hard. The spirits rush to him. They apologize and thank him at the same time, asking if he is hurt. The chicken looks at them and forces a smile, trying to reassure them. He was dying. He was content that his final moments had gone to saving the spirits. However, he might not be able to see Luria. That lone thought pained him. Even so, he wanted to die close to her, so he slowly walked. However, he no longer has strength. He stumbles and falls to the ground, no longer able to walk. Just then, an owl notices him and quickly flies down into the forest. The owl lands in front of him, his sharp eyes taking its injuries. Without wasting a second, it grabs him carefully with its strong claws and lifts him up, carrying him away. The guardian beasts gather around Luria not only because she is adorable, they are there to wipe out the sorcerers that are targeting her. The birds root out the sorcerers every day. Karo, who could sense the sorcerer's presence, would stand upright at the headboard every night. And that is how Korko was able to meet Luria. Luria unconsciously cast her powerful healing magic and instantly healed all of his wounds. The spirits thank Korko again for saving them yesterday and they are happy to see his wounds have healed. The Spirit King also tells Korko he has his gratitude for saving the spirits and he will be counting on him to guard Luria. But then he lets out an ouch as Luria in her sleep grabs his tail. He mutters this is bad, he should not appear in front of her yet and pleads with Korko to help him. Korko stands frozen, he has a way or two, but both options risk hurting her. Either he has to chomp her with his beak or tap her too hard with his paw and he is clearly worried about causing her pain. The Spirit King notices his hesitation and pleads with Karo for help. Karo lets out a small squeak. Luria reacts instantly and grabs him and pulls him tightly against her chest, still half asleep, telling him he should sleep too and Gugu should sleep as well. The Spirit King stands frozen, his mouth wide open, his breath caught in shock. Then, in her sleep Luria suddenly chomps down on his tail, at the same waking up watching the tail with round confused eyes. Later, Luria sits fully alert, staring at him with wide eyes. She points at him and asks why he has 2 tails and 2 wings. Is he a new cat species? She mutters she needs to show this suspicious creature to Mother. Then she looks at Karo and asks if he slept. He lets out a small squeak. She asks Gugu and Karo next, and they also respond with cheerful sounds. Then Luria narrows her eyes and asks if he is a spirit. He flinches immediately, his face turning pale. Before he can react, she pulls him into her arms. Luria thinks she did not notice earlier because she can hold him without covering her hands in magic. A spirit with a physical body like this must be powerful. He lets out a meow-like sound, and she says he cannot even talk properly. She wonders if she cannot talk to spirits in this life. Then she asks if he avoids talking to her because he hates her for failing to protect everyone. His mouth opens in shock. Tears build in her eyes as she remembers burning everything around her in her past life to protect them, without knowing what happened to the spirits afterward. She apologizes softly. He quickly shakes his head and says she is wrong. He does not hate her. She looks at him again and says he can talk. He hesitates, then says yes. Then he tells her she actually saved everyone back then. She asks if she successfully burned the metal tubes that imprisoned the spirits. He explains carefully that she did not burn them, she melted them. He was inside one of those tubes too and he is grateful. He thanks her sincerely. Luria hugs him tightly and asks if everyone was safe. He nods and thanks her again for saving all the spirits. She whispers in relief, thank goodness. She looks down and then asks about Roa. Is he doing well? He freezes. Then lowers his head and says unfortunately, not long after that, King Roa succumbed to his demise. Luria instantly starts sobbing. He quickly tells her not to cry. Even if spirits die, they will reincarnate someday. She wipes her tears and asks if she can see him again. He replies, he's not sure about that, but the chances are not entirely zero. She presses her forehead lightly against his and says she hopes she can meet him one day. He replies that it would be nice if she could. She asks if he could recognize Roa if he reincarnates. He apologizes and says no. She nods and tells him it is fine, and thanks him for staying alive. He thanks her back. The others watch quietly with emotional expressions. Then Luria suddenly asks if she can name him. He asks if she is sure, and says it would make him happy. Her eyes brighten and she exclaims Blackie. He immediately perks up, happy with the name. But then she suddenly gets back to Roa and asks why he died. He swallows nervously and says he cannot tell her. The king specifically asked him not to say. She asks why. He says he cannot explain that either, and apologizes. She tells him not to apologize and says she will respect it. The spirits around them start complaining that it is unfair she only gives attention to Blackie and asks to be petted too. Luria asks them aren't they the usual spirits? Can they talk now? They reply that yes, they can, but Blackie told them not to speak in front of her. Blackie quickly explains that it is not out of malice. Children who talk too much with spirits may develop abnormal speech patterns. Luria frowns and says she does not think that is true. Blackie also looks unsure now and admits she might be right. She pats one of the spirits, and it lets out a happy giggle. Soon, the spirits start demanding her to throw them away, and she begins tossing them lightly like softballs. Gugu is happy to run after them. Just then, Lydia enters with a tray and freezes at the doorway. She asks who Luria is talking to. Luria instantly raises her hands, and the spirits run and hide. Blackie quietly tells her it is better not to mention spirits, since people might get scared if she talks to something they cannot see. Luria understands what he means. So when Lydia asks again if someone is there, she quickly says no, she was just talking to Gugu. Lydia then says they should all eat cookies together. Luria excitedly says she loves cookies. Lydia watches her carefully but says nothing else. Then she gently says she doesn't mean to reprimand her strange manner of speaking, but would it be wise not to say thing is? Both her and the spirit's mouths fall open. She asks if it sounds strange. Lydia admits it is strange how she, no matter how she puts it, then adds that she has prepared food for Gugu and the others as well. Lydia looks at the chicken and asks if its name is Corto, and if she can pet him too. Luria agrees. Lydia gently runs her hand over Corto feathers and introduces herself as Luria's older sister, saying they should get along. Luria is lost in her own little world, eating cookies and mumbling she cannot believe something this delicious exists. In her previous life, she only ate vegetable scraps, specifically it was vegetable scrap that were mixed with goat feed. Lydia looks at her and says, she is saying something strange again. It's not her first time eating cookies, isn't it? She replies, yes, thing is she has eaten it before. Lydia says, there she goes again. Father and mother simply plan to watch over her as she grows healthy, so they do not pay attention to her speech. As her sister, she wouldn't exactly tell her to behave befitting of a royal, but she has had this walk feeling, but she really doesn't come off as royalty. Far from royalty, she doesn't even sound like a noblewoman. It cannot be helped, though. She's still 5. Luria replies, okay, she will be careful, but suddenly gasps. Her sister asks her what is wrong. Luria asks if at this rate, will no one take her as a bride? Her sister lets out a sigh and says there could be busybodies who would say that. She tells her sister that she does not want to get married. Lydia pauses and asks her why. Luria answers honestly that she thinks she will lose her freedom and become unhappy. Lydia looks at her and asks if she sees their mother as someone chained or unhappy. Luria thinks for a moment, then admits that if Lydia puts it like that, she does not think so. But she says she is different from their mother. She asks if, after marriage, she will still be able to spend time with goats in the mountains. Lydia goes silent for a moment and says, honestly, that would be difficult. Luria says right. So she decides she will not get married and she will speak however she wants. Lydia says that is very like her. Luria then asks if their father will decide on her partner. Lydia replies that she believes so, taking a cookie and eating it calmly. Then Luria asks if Lydia will get married. Lydia answers without hesitation that she will definitely get married. But she adds that since their father is the second prince, it is likely that His Majesty will be the one deciding her partner. If grandfather passes away before Lydia's wedding, perhaps uncle, who will take over the throne, will decide who her sister will marry. Even if father supports her decision not to marry, it is possible grandfather and uncle will force it upon her. After all, royalty has no freedom when it comes to marriage. She guesses there is no choice but to act out. If she damages her own reputation, those of equal or higher status will avoid her. Naturally, the status of being her suitor will decline. If the suitor is of lower status, it will be much easier to sabotage the engagement altogether. A noble woman who doesn't act like one, if she becomes a villainess. If rumors spread that she's a terrible daughter, she might be sent to the countryside on the pretext of recuperation. She imagines her father telling her if something happens, no, even if nothing happens, she must always rely on her father. Everything will be fine. She will do well even in the countryside. Iwan's father is the second prince, he holds the title of archduke and has his own territory. If she can buy a small piece of land and a modest house on the edge of the territory, that is good enough for her. That way she will be able to live with goats. She grins again, that creepy little smile spreading across her face as she wonders if she is a genius. Her sister watches her with a disturbed gaze and asks her if she's thinking of something strange again. She loudly says not at all, eating the cookies again and thinking she doesn't want to cause trouble for her sister, so she will act out after she gets married. Later, she is practicing with the sword again and like always Gugu is playing with a stick beside her. As she swings the wooden sword, the spirits appear again and circle around it, excitedly telling her to try hitting them. Luria quickly tells them it is dangerous. But they insist it is fine. She tells them firmly she is not playing. Still, they keep asking her to try. She groans and calls out for Blackie, asking if he is there and if he can stop them. Blackie appears. But he tells her that it is better not to speak openly, since someone might be watching. The spirits brighten at seeing him and say they want to play. Luria panics and says it is dangerous. But Blackie explains calmly that spirits do not have physical bodies, so they do not feel pain. Luria frowns and says there is still a chance something could go wrong. Blackie sighs and tells her to try lightly. He tells her to swing the sword at him. Luria hesitates, then does it. The sword passes straight through him. She freezes in shock. Blackie looks at her and says, as she can see, he is fine. But Luria immediately points out that they were hit earlier. Blackie explains that it is because they coated her sword with their own magic. They did it without thinking. Luria quickly tells them not to do that again. Blackie says it is fine. It is similar to how spirits sometimes interact with each other unconsciously. But Luria still insists it is dangerous. Blackie shrugs and says that what spirits really need is not magic, but cursed energy. He adds that explaining it properly will take too long, so he will tell her later. Luria asks again if they are really safe. Blackie confirms they are. He explains that if magic alone could hurt them, then monsters and mages would already be able to harm spirits. Luria pauses then realizes he has a point. She thinks, in her previous life, how was the Church of the One God able to capture and torment spirits? She realizes that must have been cursed energy. She will ask Kuro about that later. Blackie tells her she can just play around her magic-glad sword. It is good for training. She asks him how. He explains receiving physical stimulation the spirits do not usually experience has a positive effect on their development. The thing is, the spirits she threw grew up healthy and strong. Now there is not an ounce of hesitation on her face. She raises her sword and dares them to come at her. And just like that, she starts her practice again, but this time with the spirits as her little targets. She knocks on her father's study door. A moment later, it opens, and he looks down at her with softened eyes, asking what it is, Luria sweetie. She stares up at him with wide, serious eyes and declares that she wants to study. Later, seated on the sofa inside his study, he asks if she is not already studying the alphabet and arithmetic. She replies seriously that she wants to study history too. The thing is, she asked her teacher how deeply rooted the belief in the Church of the One God is in this world, but her teacher did not know. After hesitating briefly, she adds that she is sure father knows the history of the Church of the One God in depth. He repeats the word history and asks why she wants to learn it. Does she want to hear stories about heroes of the past? She explains that she is more curious about the Church of the One God and its ties to the royal family. His face jerks up at her invisible shock. Blinking, she asks what is wrong. After a pause, he admits it is nothing, then asks why she is curious about that. If she wants to understand the relationship between the church and the royal family, why is she looking into history? Her expression dims slightly as she admits that if the church was powerful, it feels like a lot of bad things might have happened. He studies her quietly before nodding and saying he supposes she has a point. Letting out a small sigh, she says she has to know history to understand the relationship between the church and the royal family. He tells her she is certainly right about that. That is why she wanted to know and she figured father might know. He looks at her for a moment before his expression settles into quiet resolve. He tells her he will teach her after dinner. Her eyes widen as she asks if he really will. He asks if she does not want him to. She quickly says that is not it and fidgets nervously before asking whether he is not busy. He tells her not to worry about that. Immediately brightening, she hops toward the door. Standing there with a smile, she says okay then, she will see him later and thanks him. After dinner, she sits in front of a mountain of books piled across the table and thanks father again. He chuckles faintly and tells his dear Luria there is no need to thank him for anything, though he did not expect this much enthusiasm. Shyly, she admits she just did not think he would really teach her. He softly explains that he is doing this because it is an extremely political issue and something that involves her as well. Blinking, she repeats that it involves her. His expression turns serious as he tells her she must not recklessly repeat what he is about to tell her to others. He asks whether she can promise him that. When she nods, he gently ruffles her hair and praises her as a good girl. Picking up one of the books, he murmurs to himself about where he should start before patting his lap and telling her to come here. After she settles onto his lap, he opens the history book. He explains that he will begin with the origins of the Farnesian dynasty because that is the best way to understand the relationship between the church and the royal family. Since the book is difficult and she still cannot fully read it yet, he says he will explain it instead. Turning the page, he begins explaining that 200 years ago, a great disaster claimed countless lives. Despite that, not only did the royal family fail to help the people, they attempted to extract even more labor and wealth from them. In truth, more people died because of the royal family's tyranny than from the disaster itself. She murmurs that they were cruel. He agrees, saying they truly were very cruel. Her eyes wander over the page before she slowly reads one of the words aloud. Looking surprised, he praises her, saying she can read that word very well. She proudly replies that she can and points at another word, asking what a saint is. He explains that on rare occasions, a girl loved by spirits is born into the royal family. She asks if this saint did something bad. He ruffles her hair again, clearly impressed, and tells her she is very smart for being able to read such a difficult book. However, his smile fades as he explains that the last saint of the previous royal family was apparently an impostor. From the day of the divine punishment, when the church burned down, she could no longer perform miracles, and when the great disaster struck, she failed to do anything about it. In the end, she was punished by stone. Then he abruptly stops himself and quietly says he will stop there. Her face falls. She knows firsthand how cruel that punishment is. In her previous life, the saint herself constantly used it to threaten her. Back then, she would become so frightened that she would cling to a goat while Roa petted her until she fell asleep. She begins clinging tightly to his arm. Immediately noticing, he gently squeezes her and asks what is wrong. Is she sleepy? Shakily patting Corco, she whispers that she is fine and not sleepy before asking him to continue. He resumes reading, explaining that seeing the people suffer, the founder of the Farnesian dynasty overthrew the royal family and usurped the throne. She asks if it is the same Farnesian dynasty he comes from. He confirms that it is and says the founder is his ancestor. Lowering his gaze to the text, he explains that the founder concluded the Church of the One God's violent actions caused the disasters, so he abolished the church as the state religion and stripped it of its privileges. She points out that the church still exists, though. Even her name was given by the church. He explains that among the believers, both noble and common, not all could be suppressed. For those who believed spirits caused the disaster, the church's doctrine was convenient. His voice grows colder as he explains that they believed spirits exist to serve humans, and that is the dogma of the Church of the One God. He closes the book again and tells her that from this point onward, he will tell her something she must never speak about outside this room. The atmosphere grows heavy. Quietly, he explains that although the royal family and the Church of the One God appear to be on good terms, in reality they are not. Even the naming ceremony was forced through during the reign of the second king. She listens silently. He asks if she knows what a consort clan is. After hesitating, she answers that it is the wife's father. He explains that it includes the queen's father, grandfather, brothers, and essentially her entire family line. Continuing, he says the second king borrowed the consort clan's power to defeat his brother and seize the throne. After his coronation, the church expanded its influence through that clan because the king could not ignore the nobles who supported him. He reveals that the church's true objective is to reclaim the right to place the crown upon the king's head during the coronation. Her eyes widen and he explains that during the era when the church was the state religion, the pope held the authority to crown the king. Restoring that right is the church's dearest wish. If they regain it, then formally, the church becomes the institution that grants legitimacy to the king. His eyes darken as he says that once a form is established, eventually it becomes reality. One day, nobody would be able to ascend the throne without the church's approval. Closing her eyes, she murmurs that it sounds like a state of tension. He blinks before chuckling and remarking that she knows many difficult words. He confirms that there is indeed a state of tension. The royal family cannot ignore the church, and the church is not powerful enough to openly ignore the royal family either. Then he pats her head and gently tells her she is still a child and does not need to burden herself with such complicated matters yet. He asks whether they should continue the history lesson. Suddenly, she says she wants to know about Louisa. He flinches and asks how she knows about Louisa the catastrophe. Cora quickly points toward the book. Anxiously, Luria explains that it is written there. His expression softens with pride as he praises her for being able to read so much already and tells her she must be studying hard. Smiling proudly, she asks what kind of person Louisa was and what she did. He sighs quietly and says he supposes he has to explain it now. Adjusting the book, he explains that Louisa was the daughter of the second-to-last king of the previous royal family. Her father was assassinated by his younger brother, the man who later became the last king. He adds that she was only 5 years old at the time, and official records state that she died as well. She asks then how she became a villainess. He explains that in the years following the assassination, the headquarters of the Church of the One God burned down. It was the first major catastrophe since the Great Disaster 200 years earlier. Lowering her gaze, she thinks that it was something she had to do to save the spirits. He continues quietly, explaining that afterward, the royal family and the church began claiming Louisa was responsible. Stammering, she asks how they could do that even though she was dead. Closing his eyes, he admits that yes, they did exactly that. Bitterness laces his voice as he explains that is why no sensible historian believes Louisa was truly behind it. Still, there are people who believe the accusations. He says there are also records suggesting Louisa was imprisoned and kept alive for nearly 10 years after the assassination. Testimonies from maids, soldiers, and livestock caretakers described a child treated no better than livestock. She whispers sadly that the child was pitiful. Even knowing it was herself, she still cannot help feeling sorry for that little girl. He admits he feels the same way. They may never know whether that pitiful child truly was Louisa, but he personally does not believe Louisa was the catastrophic villainess they claimed she was. A smile appears on her face as she softly says she sees. Then his expression hardens once more. He tells her that this is important. Louisa had red hair and red eyes. She quietly points out that they are the same as hers. He says yes, and because of that, there may be people who say cruel things about her. She must never believe their words. He tells her that no matter how trivial something may seem, she must tell him or her mother immediately. She should not feel guilty for tattling on someone who says something hurtful, nor should she worry about making a fuss. The adults will handle it. Smiling softly, she says she understands. Even the creatures nearby seem oddly proud of him. After a moment, she says there is one last thing she wants to know. He asks what it is. She asks what the great disaster's first folly was. His expression turns serious as he answers that it was the killing of spirits and attempts to produce spirit stones. Lowering her eyes, she wonders if the technique survived to the present day. She asks if that method has been passed down. He replies that it remains a mystery even now. She then asks if the church might repeat the same mistake someday. He admits it is possible, but tells her there is no need to worry for now. Despite appearances, he has connections within the church, and if he learns they intend to commit another foolish act, he will stop them. Relieved, she smiles and says that is good. He strokes her hair once more and asks if there is anything else she wants to know. After hesitating, She murmurs that there is one more thing. He asks what it is. She asks if Marion is doing okay because she has not visited her in half a year. The moment she asks, he looks shaken. Quickly, she asks what is wrong and if something happened to Marion. After hesitating, he quietly says that Marion is sick. She instantly turns around in his arms and asks if it is serious. Carefully, he replies that it is not a minor illness, but she does not need to worry. She immediately says she wants to visit her but he refuses. She asks why. He asks if she knows what an epidemic is. She quietly answers that it is something contagious. He confirms that it is and gently explains that this is why she must not visit Marion. Her body starts trembling. She asks about the symptoms. He admits he is not a doctor and does not know everything, but the patients develop very high fevers. She quickly asks if he has called a doctor. He promises her that arrangements have already been made, though even the doctors seem to be struggling. She shakily asks if Marion will get better. He assures her that she definitely will. Then, more softly, he explains that while she cannot visit Marion, she can write her a letter instead. She quietly says she will write one. Meanwhile, in another house, Marion lies in bed, her entire body covered in tiny red pimples. Every breath looks strained and painful. Her daughter watches through the window. Later, sitting on her bed, Luria tells her beast protectors that she might be able to heal Marion. She admits she healed a lot of people in her past life. She has suffered from an epidemic herself, but she was able to heal using recovery magic. She's skilled at identifying the causes of illness and even better at curing them. The problem is she cannot meet Marion. It is a contagious disease, so she is not allowed to see her. Blackie crosses his arms and casually declares that they simply need to find out where Marion is being kept. Luria remarks that it must be convenient being able to pass through objects. Currently, Blackie is halfway inside Gugu's mouth while Gugu violently shakes him around. Blackie yells at him to stop because he is going to end up drenched in drool. A moment later, he stands there completely soaked, his narrowed gaze full of irritation, while Gugu looks entirely unapologetic and playful. As Blackie wipes himself off, he says he can ask his friends to search for Marion. Everyone stares at him in complete dumbfounded silence. Luria blinks and asks if he actually has friends. Looking deeply offended, he demands to know what exactly she takes him for. But she points out spirits are bad at distinguishing human faces, are not they? He assures her it will be fine, they can do it. She admits the spirits know Marion, however, they are young, so they might get lost. He tells her to rest assured, the thing is, they wouldn't rely on spirits, but guardian beasts. The guardian beasts in question look completely confused. He lets out a sigh and says, guardian beasts are entities who protect spirits from sorcerers. Guardian beasts are able to defeat sorcerers. Midway through his explanation, he suddenly stares at Gugu. Gugu stares back at him with disbelief and growing fear. Blackie asks why he looks so terrified when he himself is a guardian beast. Then, in the most casual tone, he adds that sorcerers are bad people who eat spirits. Gugu starts trembling violently before curling himself beside Luria. He points out what a foolish guardian beast, not knowing his own identity. Luria gently pats Gugu on the head and says it cannot be helped since he is still just a child after all. Even if he is a baby, he is still a baby boy capable of protecting her. Gugu begins wagging his tail happily before enthusiastically licking her face. Laughing softly, she thanks Gugu and reassures him that she is not a spirit anyway, so everything will be fine. Blackie stares at her with a dumbfounded look before pointing out that sorcerers attack humans too. She stiffens instantly in Gugu's arms before blinking at him in realization. Cursed energy. She thinks, he said he would tell her about that. He admits he was about to explain that similar to how spirits have spirit powers, sorcerers have cursed energy. Cursed energy can harm spirits and curse them, which means sorcerer can harm spirits and lay curses on them. The Church of the One God's failed attempt at killing spirits was done using cursed energy. She says so they cause spirits using cursed energy. That is terrible. He tells her, but she has a chance of winning over sorcerers because she is a half-spirit. She asks him, what does that mean? He admits it is hard to explain and he's not too sure himself, but that is how it is. The thing is, she lifted her mother's curse as soon as she was born. She realizes, soon after she was reincarnated, she saw a dark haze around her and asks, was that a curse? He replies, he knew she could see it, but she points out she didn't do anything. He says no, he saw her lift the curse. She asks him, does he mean he lifted the curse when she saw that dark haze? He replies that is right. Now back to the main topic, he's talking about how he's going to ask his friends to look for Marion. She smiles and says, all right. He admits he will ask the guardian beasts to search for Marion and report her condition to him. But then she looks at Gugu and hesitates. He tells her not to worry about it. Guardian beasts are clever. Caro and Corco are also guardian beasts. He then admits he plans to ask the birds in the courtyard to help. She flinches and says what? Those birds are also guardian beasts. He replies they can help since they know Marion's face. They are pretty clever. Outside, he gathers the birds together and tells them he wants them to search for Marion. He already knows the general area. She should be somewhere in the west. Later, while drinking tea with her family, Luria struggles to figure out how to naturally bring up Marion. She reminds herself she is a strategist. Finally, she lets out a sigh and says she is really worried about Marion. Thinking she first needs information, Luria casually asks if her mother has known Marion for a long time. Her mother replies that is right. Marion is the only daughter of a Baron family, which is a branch of her family. She asks her mother what kind of person is Marion's husband. Amalia replies he is the son of a knight who served her late father, in other words, her grandfather. She murmurs, a knight family and a Baron family. Amalia then says her father thought highly of Marion's husband's father. This must be too difficult for her. Luria asks her, does that mean Marion is back home in the barony? Amalia replies no, she is in the Baron's mansion in the royal capital. She casually asks, so Marion is in the royal capital? Blackie slips through the wall, watches the conversation with a grin and disappears straight back into the ceiling. Lydia gives Luria a suspicious glare and asks, she's not planning on visiting Marion on her own, is she? She flinches and stammers, of course not. Realizing she needs to change the subject immediately, she suddenly says she actually wants to meet Marion's daughter instead. Since Marion is sick, she must be lonely. She is sure getting petting Gugu would cheer her up. Gugu lets out a cheerful bark. She asks her mother if that child is sick too. Amalia replies she is not. Luria says then she wouldn't infect her with anything, right? Amalia says she is right, however, she hesitates. So Luria turns to her father and says in a pleading voice she wants to see Marion's daughter. However, her father simply lifts her onto his lap and gently explains that it is dangerous outside the residence. She asks her father if she has to hide her red hair. He replies yes, it is better that way and asks his wife if the visit will be difficult. Amalia replies it would be, but Luria is already 5. They cannot continue to hide her hair forever. Either way, they need to gradually get her accustomed to the outside world. Doesn't he think that? He admits she has a point. He will need some time to prepare, though. Luria jumps up excitedly and cheers in victory. 3 days later, the birds inform her Marion is sleeping alone in a separate room. She asks them, is Marion properly being taken care of? Blackie replies she is not. They just leave her meals at the door 3 times a day. Her eyes tear up and she says since it is contagious, she guesses there is no helping it. Is she not being nursed because her illness is contagious? Blackie replies that might be the case. She then asks, is she eating well? He replies, she barely ate. The thing is, she has lost a lot of weight. She asks, what are her symptoms? He replies, high fever, headache, but the main symptom is the rashes all over her body. Luria thinks about it. She has cured it in her past life. She is sure it was smallpox. It is the highly contagious disease with a high fatality rate. In most cases, the patients are left neglected. After she meets the daughter, she will secretly visit the detached house, marry and Essen, and cast recovery magic. 5 days later, Amalia informs her normally that they cannot make a visit happen this quickly. It is a special case this time since they are visiting a branch family, which means they are her relatives. She replies she sees and thinks to herself, the most important thing here is to figure out how to cast healing magic on Marion. She then turns to Gugu and says they should gather up their fighting spirits. However, Amalia immediately tells no, Gugu will be on house-sitting duty. Amalia says even if they are relatives, bringing a pet while visiting someone sick is bad manners. Her mouth falls open. She thinks this is bad. They need to stick to the original plan. She points out, but the daughter would want to see Gugu. Amalia says the daughter she must be referring to is Sarah, and Sarah is afraid of dogs. Not to mention Gago is large and might scare even children who are not normally afraid of dogs. Luria says someone like that exists while the dog is whining and crying on the floor. Amalia smiles and says if Tara says she wants to see Gago, then they can invite her to their house. Luria lets out a sigh and says it cannot be helped while Gago looks at her with utter betrayal and starts licking her, pleading with her not to abandon him. The maid pulls Gago away and says they cannot have the young lady smelling like a dog before she leaves. However, Luria immediately hugs Gago tightly again before pulling back with a determined expression and declaring that she is leaving the house in his care. He becomes happy by the responsibility and lets out a woof. She then asks her mother what about Koro and Korko. She says it is better not to bring them either. However, Luria scoops Koro up and hides him inside her dress, the appeal of being small. Seeing this, Korko immediately jumps onto Gago and curls himself tightly, clearly trying to prove he can become small too. But Amalia says Korko is a bit too large. He also looks shocked. Gago can only console him. She looks at Koro and says he can stay in her pocket. She will have Koro find the passage leading to the room where Marion is being quarantined. Later she is wearing a small hood and hiding all her hair as Amalia tells her she has to hide her hair so she must not take off her hood until they enter the estate. She touches her red hood realizing it is red so her hair wouldn't stand out. Amalia then asks her if she remembers to bring the sweets for Sarah. She replies of course she has everything prepared. The maid and the assistant inform her that they will be waiting by the carriage. Amalia remarks that might be for the best. Luria looks up at the mansion, her mouth rounding in shock. So this is Marion's house. She snuggles Caro inside her pocket, whispering for him to hide until it is playtime with Sarah. With a squeak, he burrows deeper into the fabric. The door opens, and the Baron steps outside. Lowering his head into a bow, he welcomes them to his residence. Luria stands there awkwardly with two huge men looming behind her. They are butler apprentices. The thing is, her father was worried about her leaving the house, so he assigned her guards. Apparently, they are masters in both magic and martial arts. If she wants to heal Marion, she has to move secretly. She needs to sup through their watch. Suddenly, she pulls down her hood, leaving the man utterly stunned. Red eyes and red hair, she looks just like Louisa the Catastrophe. Then he gasps that she truly is adorable. Luria thanks the Baron before glancing around and asking if Sarah is not here. Amalia tells the Baron that Luria spent the whole journey talking about wanting to meet Sarah. The Baron laughs nervously and explains that Sarah is still young, so her etiquette is not suited for noble company yet. Amalia says she does not mind and considers Marion's child a relative of hers. The Baron hurriedly says she is too kind, but unfortunately Sarah is not ready to meet her Royal Highness. Amalia smiles and repeats that she does not mind, the emphasis in her voice making the Baron stiffen. Raising his hands nervously, he blurts out how very generous of her and quickly instructs the butler to call Sarah now. Soon, Sarah comes out. Everyone freezes in shock. She has ears and a tail. She could be a beast man, but neither Marion nor the Baron is one, so perhaps she inherits the trait from a grandparent. The moment she notices Luria staring, she hurriedly hides her ears. The Baron lets out a strained sigh and tells Sarah to introduce herself properly. Sarah nervously murmurs her name. Then, when her father sharply tells her to put her hands in front of her, she quickly clasps her hands in front of herself. Luria smiles brightly and introduces herself, adding that they should get along. Sarah only looks away without responding. She flinches when her father angrily tells her to return the greeting. The Baron quickly apologizes, saying he spoils her too much, so she lacks manners and etiquette. Amalia says that is not the case at all. She steps in front of Luria and softly tells Sarah that she is her mother's friend. Sarah bows hurriedly, but Amalia gently catches her hands before bending down. She tells Sarah that if something troubles her, she can tell her anything because she wants to help her. Sarah quietly agrees. But then she gasps. Behind Amalia, her father is frantically making shoo-shoo motions with his hands. Sarah immediately scurries away. The Baron forces out a tight smile and says how embarrassing it is. Since Marion falls ill, Sarah lacks proper education. Amalia simply remarks that she thinks Sarah is adorable. The Baron smiles stiffly and thanks her for her kind words. Once they settle into the living room, Amalia asks how Marion is doing. The Baron starts explaining, but Luria tunes him out. She has already heard about this from the birds. At any rate, she needs to escape this place and head to Marion. Suddenly, her mother smiles at her and says, "Oh, Luria, dear," she guesses it cannot be helped. She looks so sleepy. This adult talk must be boring. Luria looks at her in confusion and says she is not sleepy. But Amalia has already turned back toward the Baron, remarking that the conversation is probably difficult for children. The Baron smiles nervously and says that is very understandable. Amalia brightens and suggests that Luria play with Sarah instead since she is sure the Baron would not mind. The Baron's face pales as he hurriedly starts protesting, but Amalia cuts him off smoothly. Turning toward one of the maids, she instructs her to escort Luria to Sarah's room. When the Baron tries protesting again, she gives him a smile sharp enough to make even Luria nervous. She says he worries too much and adds that Luria's manners are not perfect either. Then she sweetly states that they will escort Luria to Sarah's room now. Luria thinks her mother looks terrifying. So this is the pressure of the royal family. The maid looks like she saw a ghost and quickly leads Luria away. On the way, Luria casually asks where Marion is staying. The maid pauses by a window and points toward a house in the distance, explaining that Marion is over there but her illness is contagious. Luria replies, "Yeah, she knows that," thinking if she knows the direction, she can figure something out. And if it is only one maid, she might also be able to shake her off too. But how will she do that? She has to be unnoticeable, otherwise it will reach Mom's ears. Should she pretend to go to the bathroom, then escape, but it is possible that the bathroom is in the opposite direction of where Marion is. She starts glancing around, wondering if there is any other way. Suddenly, she freezes as one of the guards leans closer and whispers to rest assured he shall guard her safely. She thinks he's terrifying, she did not notice his presence at all. She mumbles he doesn't have to follow her. He says, of course he does, it is his job to protect her. She narrows her eyes, thinking maybe the fact that only one person came along is a silver lining. Still, even one first-class guard is difficult enough to shake off. There is no other way. She will have the butler wait outside Sarah's room. The maid suddenly pauses and bows, asking them to wait a moment. From inside the room, Luria hears shouting. The thing is, she has a special skill that sharpens her hearing whenever she focuses. A voice screams at the child from inside the room that she is a disgrace, someone like her doesn't belong in the Baron's mansion. She mutters, "It looks like there's some kind of trouble." The maid then knocks on the door, and the door opens. And a woman comes out, asking, what does she want? The maid tells her, Princess Luria from the Archduke family is here. The woman glances at her, and her eyes sharpen in anger. And then she mutters, how ominous. Luria thinks she is probably the Baron's sister who got pregnant and came back to her family home. She looks away dismissively. The woman's mouth falls open in outrage as she demands to know where Luria's manners are. She complains that Luria does not even introduce herself and calls her a rude and sinister child who might suit that gloomy and foolish Sarah well. Luria says that she can hear her. The woman flinches. Luria flatly asks for her name. The woman stammers "huh" and Luria tells her not to "huh" her, she's asking for her name because she needs to tell her father. She cannot overlook the woman insulting Sarah. After all, Sarah's mother nursed her with her own milk. The guard behind her says he shall investigate the woman's identity for her. Luria simply replies okay. The woman flees while excusing herself. Luria then turns toward the guard and tells him to stay outside. He asks why. Luria explains that Sarah is being bullied and might cry. He says he understands. However, he tells her to leave the door open so he can step in immediately if something happens. She says, okay, but he should also keep watch and keep the maid from coming in. Inside, Sarah is sitting on the floor next to the bed. She repeats that she is cute, a good girl, her mother's treasure, a good girl. Luria's eyes sting. Those must be Marion's words. Sarah flinches when Luria approaches, trembling slightly, but Luria simply walks over and hugs her tightly. She is so thin. Is she even eating properly? Luria seriously tells Sarah to leave everything to her because she thinks of Sarah as her little sister, so Sarah can treat her like an older sister. Sarah repeats the words older sister. Luria nods and reminds her that she is raised on Marion's milk too. When Sarah hesitates, Luria firmly says Marion's illness will definitely be cured, and once she gets better, Sarah can come with them too. But Sarah weakly whispers that she is a beast man, and beast men are disgusting. Luria realizes Sarah grew up hearing those words. Firmly, she tells Sarah that beastmen are not disgusting, and neither is she. Sarah is Marion's treasure, cute, a good girl, and her little sister. Suddenly, Sarah bursts into tears. At the same moment, Caro pops out from Luria's pocket. He climbs onto Sarah's shoulder and pats her head. She says it's a squirrel holding her. Luria explains that he is Caro, a prairie dog. Sarah smiles through her tears and says he is so cute. Luria nods approvingly at Caro and praises him for doing a good job. Caro looks smug. She thinks she will ask for Mother's help about Sarah, and now healing Marion comes first. She asks Sarah if she knows where her mother is. She takes her to the window and points at the solitary house, saying she cannot go in though because she will catch her disease. Luria thinks thanks to her swordsmanship training, she can run fast for a 5-year-old, but it will be bad if anyone sees her. She especially cannot let the butler see her. As a butler who serves her as a bodyguard, he must be fast. She is sure he can bring her back before she can take 10 steps. Suddenly, she looks at the house and haze is surrounding it. Her eyes widen and she blurts, "Is that a haze?" Sarah, confused, asks her what does she mean. She replies, "There is a dark haze surrounding the house. Can she not see it?" Sarah admits she doesn't see it. Luria thinks no way. It is similar to that cursed haze that almost killed Mother following her birth. But if it is really cursed energy, wouldn't the guardian birds have noticed and told her? But she tells herself this is not the time to be confused and pushes the window open and freezes. Gugu casually sits there. Gugu beams at her. For a moment, Luria only stands there in shock. However, Sarah's face suddenly pales. Before she can scream, Luria covers her mouth. However, the guard outside senses it and steps into the room. Caro immediately starts quaking, frantically waving his tiny arms while warning her that he is coming. When the guard looks over, he only sees the two girls standing calmly by the window with innocent smiles on their faces. He quietly steps back outside again. Luria lets out a breath before murmuring that they are safe. She smiles at Sarah and explains that the huge dog from earlier is her friend. Outside the window, Gugu happily stares at them. Luria tells Sarah that his name is Gugu and reassures her that he is not scary. Sarah hesitantly admits that she heard about him from her mother before. Luria says Gugu is Marion's friend too. Sarah admits that he is actually really cute. Luria agrees with her and the compliments make Gugu's tail wag even faster. Then Luria asks why he is here and if he chased after her. A small smile appears on her face. He is going to get scolded for this, she will get scolded together with him then. But she tells him she is glad he is here and asks for his help. She then turns to Sarah and says she has to see Marion and asks for her cooperation. Sarah immediately says no, she will catch her illness, but she looks smug and tells Sarah she will be fine, she is special so she wouldn't catch it. Sarah's eyes instantly brighten with admiration as she exclaims that it is amazing. She thinks she can catch it like any other person would, but if she doesn't put it like that, then Sarah wouldn't understand. If she says she has to get close to Marion to heal her, she is sure she will easily cooperate with her. She tells Sarah to pretend that she is taking a nap with her. Before climbing out the window, she promises that she will return in a minute. Then she climbs onto Gugu's back who runs toward the solitary house. As they approach, Luria looks at the haze surrounding the building and realizes it truly is a curse. The guardian beasts, Gugu and the birds are all here, but they are not doing anything, which means the sorcerer who cast the curse must not be around anymore. Maybe the curse is only what they left behind. Blackie said she has the power to lift curses, like she did when she had just been born. She's pretty sure she strongly wished for the haze to disappear. If things happen, she tells Gugu she will break the window and will count on him. He nods. Then Luria shuts her eyes. With all her concentration, she wishes for the curse to disappear. The dark haze disappears and she looks inside, wondering if she succeeded, but the rashes are still there and she looks like she's still having a hard time breathing. In her previous life, she was able to cast healing magic from a separate place. She wishes she could do something even close to that. She then asks for Blackie to lend her his powers. He suddenly rises out of the ground and tells her to leave it to him. She thanks him and a floating ball of light appears in front of her. Suddenly her rashes start going away. He looks happy and says they succeeded. She looks at him in surprise, not knowing that he appeared, but he tells her they're in public, so they should leave the difficult conversation for later, and then slips back into the ground. She looks around, realizing not only one is watching, but they do not know when people might come. Since Blackie said they succeeded, Marion must be okay now. She hopes Marion gets better and tells her Sarah is waiting for her. However, dizziness suddenly washes over her. Maybe she really cannot become like her old self again. She glances toward the birds perched above the house and quietly thanks them, telling them she will leave Marion in their care. When she returns to Sarah's room, Sarah climbs out of bed and anxiously asks how her mother is doing. Luria smiles reassuringly and says Marion is fine and will recover soon. Sarah instantly brightens and says she is so happy. Then Luria asks Sarah if she wants to write a letter for Marion. Sarah admits that she cannot write. Luria tells her that she will teach her then. Meanwhile, Gugu whines from the window. Luria quickly pats him, praising him for being a huge help. That immediately makes him happy again. Sarah timidly says she wants to pet him too. Then she gently pets his nose while marveling at what a huge dog he is. Luria then tells Gugu he should hurry back home, but he looks reluctant to leave. However, Luria warns him that if people discover he comes here, he will definitely get scolded. Instantly, all the fur on his body rises in alarm. Luria stares at him before asking if he is scared now. She points out that the servant who let him loose will also get into trouble, so they should apologize properly later. Caro suddenly starts frantically waving his little arms again, but it is already too late. Amalia lifts Caro into her arms while remarking that Gugu seems to be here as well. She notices him hiding outside the window, but his ears are visible. Good grief, she mutters. Gugu collapses onto the ground dramatically. Amalia dryly remarks that she believes he understands he did something bad. Luria blurts out that it is her fault because Gugu only comes since he worries about her. Amalia says she already knows that. Then she tells Gugu that he will return together with them later, but until then, he must wait here obediently. Normally she would scold a dog on the spot, but since he is intelligent, she decides to postpone it for later. Then she instructs the butler to inform the people at home that Gugu is here so nobody worries unnecessarily. Amalia turns towards Sarah with a soft smile and asks if she would like to visit their residence. Sarah startles a little before quietly repeating, their residence. Amalia nods and explains that she means Luria's home, her home, and their family's residence. Sarah nervously squeezes her ears and hesitates. However, Amalia reassures her that the Baron gladly gives his permission. Earlier, right after Luria left for Sarah's room, Amalia looks at the Baron and calmly states they should turn to the important topic and says she's talking about Sarah. Amalia says if she remembers correctly, Sarah is the successor of this barony. He says that is right. She shuts her eyes, thinking Sarah is the only daughter of Marion, the Baron's lawful wife. At this rate, he will end up adopting a son to take over the family, but what does he think of this? In the kingdom of Oleunius, titles are typically inherited to men. Women inherit only when circumstances demand it. If things proceed as they usually do, just as the Baron inherited the title by marrying Marion, Sarah's husband will become the next Baron. The Baron hesitates and says if she says so, but she narrows her eyes and says the barony, although distant, has connections to the Marquis of Kreberg. What do they think of an heir with such ears? He says, well, he also thinks that is a problem, but she says, exactly, it seems he has another heir in mind. He quickly says that is not true, but she tells him not to underestimate the Archduke's intelligence-gathering capabilities. She thinks she gathered information for Luria's safety, however, she found out he was bullying Sarah with his mistress. She knows he wants his child who will be born soon to succeed him, that is why he thinks of Sarah as a nuisance. Is she right? He starts to say he doesn't, but she tells him not to pretend. Finally, his expression hardens as he admits the truth. He loathes the idea of a lowly beastman inheriting the prosperous Marquis bloodline. Amalia merely smiles and says so that is how he thinks. The Baron looks surprised by her calm reaction before immediately agreeing. He starts explaining himself again, but Amalia cuts him off before he can continue. He does not need to say more. However, she quietly asks if he understands how badly this could damage his reputation. He asks beyond having a beastman as an heir. She replies, of course, and says the one who carries the blood of the barony is Marion, not him. People will assume that he's trying to usurp the family. She thinks there are a few noble beastmen. If he disinherits his legitimate heir and gives that little title to his mistress's child, it will utterly ruin his reputation. She says in that case, she shall adopt Sarah to the archdukedom. He flinches in shock and says, is she taking her as her ward? She thinks if Sarah gets adopted, she will lose her inheritance rights to the barony. However, if she becomes a member of the Archduke family, letting the mistress child inherit the title will not attract negative attention, since no one would think that a barony would go against an archdukedom. They will naturally assume that the adoption is also the Archduke's wish. He looks nervous and says that can be done, but is His Highness fine with it? Amalia says the scientist loves Luria, but Luria has some circumstances that hinder her ability to make friends. He thinks they must be embarrassed by her red hair and eyes and wouldn't let her socialize, and says in that case, he agrees. She says they should not delay and proceed to it. After he finishes signing, she gets up and says, all right then, she will be taking Sarah with her immediately. As she turns to leave, he runs after her and tells her to please take care of his child. She says he can count on her. By adopting Sarah, Amalia is thinking of removing her from the Baron's list of heirs. That must be what the Baron thinks. However, becoming a ward means one will gain the support of the Archdukedom. If she becomes their ward, she will not lose her rights to inherit the title. In other words, if the Archduke wishes for it, he can have Sarah inherit the barony. She then smiles at the child and asks if they shall head back home. But Luria tells her to wait a minute. She asks Luria if something is wrong. She thinks there's no bad feeling anymore. She's sure Marion will be okay and says, no, everything is fine. Sarah and Luria hold hands as they walk out together with the guards and Amalia beside them, but then the mistress suddenly steps in front of them. Sarah instinctively flinches, but Luria squeezes her hand and whispers that it is okay because she is right there with her. The moment the mistress notices Amalia, her face instantly brightens, and she greets Her Highness while thanking her for coming to her residence. Amalia dryly replies that she does not recall this being her residence and asks whether she does not know how rude it is to speak to her before greeting the others properly. The mistress quickly covers her mouth, her face paling. Luria thinks the woman does not even speak to her earlier, so she wonders what suddenly changes. Did something happen that makes her incredibly happy? Amalia then glances around and asks whether the Baron is not going to see them off since there is not even a single butler present. Her butler remarks that they must be busy. Amalia calmly replies that in that case it cannot be helped, since there must apparently be something more important than sending her off. The mistress instantly starts panicking. Even Caro lets out a nervous squeak. Luria looks down at him and asks what is wrong, but then her eyes shift toward the drawing room where black mist pours out from inside, making her wonder whether something happens there. Amalia looks down at her and asks if something is wrong. Luria replies that it is nothing, but before she can finish, the door suddenly bursts open and one of the butlers comes running outside. Amalia tells her men to find out what happened. Moments later, one of them returns and explains that the Baron collapses. Amalia calmly asks whether that is so and wonders if it happens from anxiety. But then she simply closes her eyes and tells Sarah and Luria that they should head home. Luria, however, remains curious about the Baron's condition. Why is magical power overflowing from that room? Suddenly, Blackie pops out and quietly warns her not to say anything. He explains that Marion's curse got sent back to the Baron. Luria asks IGF if it is really okay not to do anything about it. Amalia assumes she is speaking to her and replies that it is not something they need to handle because the Baron can call his own doctor. Blackie tells her he knows she can purify the curse, but the Baron brought this upon himself. Luria hesitates before quietly replying that she understands, though she thinks she will ask Blackie more about curses later. Outside, the maid and assistant wait by the carriage. The maid informs Amalia that the carriage is ready. Amalia smiles and thanks her before saying that there is somewhere she wants to visit before they leave. She then heads toward the garden, remarking that since Gugu came here, she needs to pick him up. The maid hurries after her, nervously saying that walking around a place like this while wearing such a dress is not appropriate. Amalia laughs openly and apologizes. Luria mutters that her mother is a tomboy. The maid tells her she is exactly like her mother. Just then, Gugu comes running over and immediately hugs Luria. She laughs softly and tells him he is really helpful today, thanking him while whispering that if he gets scolded, she will get scolded together with him. Gugu immediately rolls onto his back and exposes his belly for rubs. Luria tells Sarah to pet him too. Sarah carefully touches his soft fur and says he is so fluffy. Luria proudly agrees and explains that Gugu especially likes getting petted on his stomach more than his nose. Sarah says she understands. Amalia watches the children with a soft smile before simply walking away. Luria stares after her in shock, wondering whether they are not getting scolded after all. Amalia then approaches the solitary house and gently knocks on the door, telling Marion that it is her and that she does not need to answer, but she wants her not to worry about Sarah because she will take responsibility for looking after her. Marion quietly thanks her from inside. Sarah notices Amalia standing there and immediately runs toward the house, calling out to her mother and saying that it is her. Marion's eyes widen before she softly says Sarah sounds so happy. Sarah brightly replies that she is. Marion suddenly breaks down sobbing into her hands and apologizes to her sweet Sarah, saying she is sorry she cannot protect her or hold her close. Sarah immediately tells her she does nothing wrong and says she loves her. Marion's eyes fill with tears as she thanks her and says she loves her too. Then she asks Sarah to make sure she listens carefully to Lady Amelia's words. Sarah obediently promises she will. Marion gently praises her as a good girl and says she will always be her pride and joy. Sarah sniffles and says she knows she will always be her treasure. Luria then tells Marion to get well soon because she does not need to worry about anything anymore since Sarah will become her little sister. Marion sounds peaceful as she thanks her adorable little lady. Luria then tells Amalia that she wants to give Marion food. Amalia replies that she will take care of it because they absolutely cannot leave things this way. Afterward, Sarah and Marion continue talking through the door for quite a while. Even though Sarah should not have many happy memories because of the bullying, she still keeps talking about cheerful things. Eventually, Amalia gently places a hand on Sarah's shoulder and softly asks if they should head home now because Marion must be getting tired. Sarah's expression falls, but she quietly agrees. Amalia tells Marion not to worry because she will arrange proper meals for her and make sure she rests well. Marion thanks her and asks her to also pass along her gratitude to Lord Grauf. Later, when they try placing Gugu inside the carriage, he does not fit at all. Luria tells him he should seriously think about how huge he is becoming. In the end, he simply runs alongside the horses instead. Luria looks outside at the guards and notices there seem to be fewer of them now. Perhaps they have other duties. Gugu also looks happy while running with the horses beside the carriage. Luria wonders if the horses are not scared of him. The maid explains that they always play together during walks, so they get along very well. Apparently, the horses simply think of Gugu as a friend who looks a little different. Luria says yes, but then a loud stomach growl suddenly echoes through the carriage. Luria immediately asks Sarah if she is hungry because she has plenty of sweets stored away. The maid opens the sweets box while Amalia pulls Sarah onto her lap and encourages her to try some because they are delicious. Sarah's eyes brighten as she quickly chomps down on a cookie. Luria happily tells her to feel free to eat the whole thing. However, Sarah shyly asks if Luria is not going to eat too. Luria starts saying she already ate a large breakfast that morning, but her own stomach suddenly lets out an enormous growl, cutting her off completely. Amalia smiles warmly and tells her to eat some too because food always tastes better when shared with everyone, and they have plenty anyway. Then she tells the maid to have one too, promising that it tastes wonderful. The maid tries one and thanks her sincerely, admitting that it is really delicious. Luria takes one as well and somehow it tastes even better than usual. She then looks toward Sarah and says she hopes Marion gets better soon. Sarah smiles brightly and says she cannot wait. Meanwhile, Luria is thinking about why Blackie never told her that Marion's illness is actually a curse. Suddenly, the butler catches up to the carriage on horseback and sharply knocks against the side of it. Amalia wonders who it is before the butler urgently informs her that the Baron has caught smallpox. Immediately, Amalia orders that they must not return to the main residence and instead head directly to the lakeside villa. She also instructs everyone not to come into contact with anyone from the main estate. Then she orders the carriage to stop because she wants to send a letter immediately. Luria watches her rapidly write and says she is so fast. Amalia casually replies that she writes regularly after all. Once the letter is finished, she instructs the butler to deliver it to her husband without any physical contact. The butler assures her he understands. Amalia then explains that if the Baron truly catches smallpox, there is a possibility they expose themselves too. They absolutely cannot risk spreading it to Grauf, Gilbert, Lydia, or anyone else at the estate. Therefore they will temporarily stay at the local villa near the lake. Luria asks Sarah's mother how long they need to quarantine. Amalia looks mildly surprised that Luria even knows such a complicated word before answering that it will only take 5 days. If none of them show symptoms by then, they can immediately return to the main residence. She then reassures the guards that she will provide them all with special compensation for the inconvenience. Suddenly, Blackie appears again and quietly tells Luria that she does not need to answer him, but he already said this before the Baron didn't actually catch smallpox. The curse simply resembles smallpox, so she can relax because Marion's curse returned to the Baron. None of them will catch anything, and everything will be fine. After saying this concludes his report, he disappears again. Luria lets out a quiet sigh of relief, glad to know they are safe. Still, even if she says that aloud, nobody would believe her anyway. Besides, she has never visited the lakeside villa before, so she secretly looks forward to it. She turns towards Sarah and reassures her that they will be okay. Soon, they arrive at the lake. Amalia smiles gently and points ahead, asking Sarah and Luria whether they can see the lake because it is very pretty, isn't it? Both girls agree that it is beautiful, while Luria raises her hand and says the place feels a little mysterious too. Amalia asks whether that is so before suggesting that perhaps Luria senses the guardian spirit's presence. According to legend, a great guardian spirit lives within the lake. Luria smiles and says she hopes that is true. Sarah eagerly agrees with her and together they stand before the lakeside villa. Soon, the birds follow her to the lake, making Luria brighten as she says the birds come too before thanking everyone. Sarah asks if the birds are her friends, and Luria proudly replies that they are before telling her she can pet them. Sarah carefully pets the owl, who instantly looks delighted. She says he is so cute and fluffy. Luria tells her there is also Corco, but he is currently house-sitting, though Sarah can meet him at the mansion later. Sarah immediately says she wants to see him, and Luria replies that Corco is cute too. Nearby, Amalia talks with the butlers before turning toward her daughter and loudly warning her not to wander too far. Luria promises she will not. Looking around, Luria then remarks that they are surrounded by a huge forest, yet she barely senses any animals nearby. Sarah says she has a point. Luria glances toward Koro and wonders aloud whether there are squirrels or prairie dogs around. Suddenly, she notices a stick lying on the ground and immediately picks it up, her eyes sparkling as though she has just found treasure. She proudly announces that she found a cool stick. Sarah stares at her in confusion and awkwardly asks whether that is really cool. Luria enthusiastically replies that it is because it can go swoosh swoosh and then swings it around dramatically. Sarah still looks confused but slowly replies that she sees. Just then, Amalia approaches them and tells them they should head inside already. However, the moment she notices the stick in Luria's hand, she gasps in alarm and quickly asks what kind of stick that is and whether it has bugs on it. She nearly looks ready to faint because Luria has a long history of causing bug-related disasters. Luria quickly reassures her that it does not. Amalia immediately relaxes and says then it is fine. As they enter the mansion, Luria looks around in amazement and says it is so pretty while asking whether it is cleaned every day. Amalia replies that it is, especially to prevent smallpox from spreading, though she notes that the caretaker is currently absent. The maid tells them she will prepare tea, and Amalia thanks her. Luria sits down while still holding the stick in her hand. Amalia dryly tells her to put the stick down when sitting because it is bad manners, and she also reminds her that she no longer needs to wear her hood inside. Luria obediently removes the hood and places the stick beside it. Amalia assures both girls that there is nothing to worry about. Luria replies that she is not worried, while Sarah quietly says she understands. Amalia then explains that things will be a little different than usual because the attendants are busy communicating with the guards at the main residence. Because of that, they only have one maid serving them, meaning they will have to handle many things themselves. Nonetheless, she understands none of them are used to that yet. Luria confidently says she can do it, though. Amalia praises her, saying that is amazing. At that moment, the maid walks in carrying tea and snacks and overhears Amalia explaining that what matters most is reducing the maid's burden. The maid immediately blushes and says, Amalia does not need to go out of her way for her before offering the sweets to everyone. Luria thanks her and tells Sarah to eat too, but then Gugu starts whining pitifully while staring at the cupcakes. Luria sighs and says she guesses she has no choice before handing him one. Gugu immediately devours it in one bite. Meanwhile, Koro stands nearby staring at her sadly. Luria quickly says she cannot leave him out either and gives him a cupcake too. Unlike Gagu, Koro eats his sweet slowly. The atmosphere becomes peaceful as the girls eat their snacks while the maid watches them with a smile. The maid then tells Amalia to leave everything to her because even if she is alone, the main resident still supports her, so Amalia will not be inconvenienced. However, Amalia gently tells her not to overwork herself. Luria thinks servants have their own pride, but she will still do what she can. Suddenly, she tells Sarah with a grin that she has an idea and that they should go exploring. Sarah repeats the word exploring in confusion. Luria excitedly replies that they should investigate what the villa has to offer. Then she turns toward her mother and asks whether they can. Amalia tells her they must not leave the residence grounds and that there are also certain places they absolutely cannot enter. Luria asks for an example, but Amalia only replies that she will understand once she sees it. She warns her not to enter places where the attendants forbid them from going. Then after a moment, she allows them to explore and says she leaves Dago and Karo in charge of watching over Luria and Sarah. Luria immediately drags Sarah in front of one of the rooms and proudly announces that this will be their base. It will be the place they return to if they get separated or if something goes wrong. She then declares that the exploration party should now depart with the crew. Sarah repeats the word crew in confusion again. Luria smugly explains that since they are an exploration party, she will be the captain while Dago and Karo are the crew members. Soon, she approaches the kitchen, but the butler quickly stops her before she can enter and firmly tells her not to take another step. Luria jumps in surprise and says he startled her. He apologizes politely, explaining that he panicked because she looked ready to enter the kitchen. Luria tilts her head in confusion and mutters that she would not steal any food. The butler hurriedly clarifies that he does not mean that. The problem is that food from the main residence is being stored there. Luria says she understands and wonders if the servants divided areas depending on who is allowed to use them. The butler smiles and explains that they organize the schedule carefully to minimize unnecessary movement in case unforeseen circumstances occur. Luria replies that she gets it and remarks that it would be troublesome if smallpox spreads farther from the main residence. Even though she knows it is not actually smallpox and therefore definitely cannot spread, she still decides not to get in their way. The butler then picks up a rope and explains that prohibited areas will be blocked with ropes like this, so she must never cross them. Luria looks at Sarah and asks if she understands. Sarah still looks utterly blank with confusion before awkwardly replying that she understands too. Luria nods firmly and declares that they should continue exploring the areas they are allowed to enter. As they walk, she taps the floor repeatedly with her stick. Sarah asks why she keeps doing that. Luria replies very seriously that she is checking for traps. Sarah immediately asks whether there are traps here. Narrowing her eyes dramatically, Luria replies that the possibility is low, but explorers can never be too careful. Soon, they encounter one of the ropes blocking the hallway and realize they cannot continue in that direction. Luria immediately turns another way and suggests they explore somewhere else instead. They enter a room, and Luria immediately marvels at how pretty and clean everything looks. Then she climbs upstairs and jumps onto one of the beds, declaring that it is so soft, though different from a futon. She asks Sarah which room she likes best. Although most of them look similar, some receive more sunlight than others. While Sarah quietly thinks about it, Luria happily says she likes bigger rooms because that way she can sleep together with Gugu and Karo. Then she brightly tells Sarah that she should sleep together with her too. Sarah hesitantly asks whether she really can. Luria immediately replies that of course she can. Sarah blushes softly and thanks her. Looking out the window together, they admire the lake visible from the room. Sarah comments that it is very pretty and that the sunlight there looks nice too. Luria asks whether they should choose this room, and Sarah happily agrees. Luria thinks she will ask her mother about it later before saying they should continue exploring. Then she opens the bathroom door and stares at the tub while explaining that if she turns the handle, cold water will come out. She suddenly becomes gloomy and mutters that she knows she has to wash with it if she gets dirty. Luria admits that she once tries to get hot water before but accidentally drenches herself with freezing water instead. Marion helps her afterward. Sarah quietly asks if her mother really did that, and Luria replies yes before promising that if something ever happens to Sarah too, she will come save her as well. Sarah giggles and thanks her. Standing there dramatically with her stick in hand, Luria then says that controlling water is difficult anyway. Later, they notice workers outside the window building something in the garden. Luria guesses that it might be a henhouse, but Sarah points out that it probably looks more like a house for people because the doorway is human-sized. Luria immediately says Sarah might be right and praises her for being sharp. Then they notice the butler nearby. Luria quickly tells Sarah they should stay quiet and listen carefully to what the adults are saying. After concentrating for a moment, Sarah says they are discussing a house for the guards. Luria looks at her in amazement and asks whether she can really hear them from here. Sarah quietly replies that she has very good hearing. Luria immediately exclaims that it is so cool. Listening carefully herself, Luria realizes father must feel uneasy relying only on the 5 attendants quarantined together with them. Apparently, the workers are urgently building sleeping quarters for 10 guards. The 5 quarantined attendants will protect the residence itself while the 10 guards secure the outer perimeter, and they plan to work the entire day to finish it. Suddenly, Luria gasps and says she forgets something important. There is no bathroom. Sarah immediately points out that there is one right over there. Luria quickly clarifies that there are bathrooms for them, but not for Gagap and Korko. Sarah realizes she is right. Luria dramatically explains that at this rate, Gago and Korko will not be able to use the bathroom and will become sick. Gago looks horrified and covers his eyes in despair. Luria quickly announces that they should ask mother for help right away. They find Amalia working in the study and she asks what is wrong. Luria immediately explains that Gago has no bathroom. She adds that Karo is small enough for her to carry him to her bathroom, but Gago is too large, so at this rate he will not be able to relieve himself and will become sick. Gago trembles dramatically in the background while covering his eyes. Amalia smiles faintly and reassures him that Gago and Korko's bathroom arrangements will arrive soon. Then she casually says that it is time for Gago to take a walk and asks the assistant to handle it. He immediately replies that she can leave it to him. Luria looks proudly at Gago and tells him she trusts him to explore outside before grandly ordering him to go claim his territory. She then tells her mother that she found a room she likes and wants to sleep there. Amalia replies that it is all right and tells her she may use it. Sarah, who is nearly dozing off already, gets called by Luria, who tells her they should take a nap together before informing her mother that she is going to sleep in the bedroom now. Amalia tells them off they go and then instructs the maid to carry Sarah. The maid gently picks Sarah up while Luria guides them toward the bedroom. Along the way, the maid glances at Sarah's clothes and remarks that it seems Lady Sarah's outfits need tailoring. Luria asks it would not be better to simply bring clothes from the Baron's residence instead. However, the maid points out that there is no proper opening for Sarah's tail and explains that she doubts custom clothes are ever prepared for her. Luria says she didn't realize since her clothes looked nice. The maid replies the materials are indeed good, it's just not the best for her, the design itself is old so they are probably second-hand. She also adds that Sarah does not normally wear dresses and this might be a special case because Madame visited. Luria quietly realizes the maid means Sarah usually wears shabby clothing. She declares she will ask mother to buy Sarah prettier clothes. The maid gently tells her not to worry because Madame is already working on it. Reaching the room, the maid carefully places Sarah on the bed while Luria secretly thinks she should hide the cool stick beneath the bed so she can immediately grab it when an enemy attacks. As she does so, the maid says there is actually something she has been curious about. Luria immediately smiles proudly and says it is the cool stick, right? The maid replies that it is not what she means before pointing toward the doll Sarah tightly clutches. Luria immediately explains that it is Sarah's precious doll. Sarah hugs it when Luria first enters her room earlier. It is her treasure and something that supports her during difficult times, which is why she takes such good care of it. Then Luria climbs onto the bed beside Sarah and announces that she is going to sleep too. The maid asks whether she should read them a picture book first, but Luria replies there is no need. Secretly, she plans to pretend to sleep while hearing Blackie explain everything later. Meanwhile, deep within the forest near the Grand Duke's mansion, one of the birds informs the other animals that Lady Luria will not be returning there because she heads toward the spring instead. Mool says the larger animals stand out too much, so they should send the little ones instead. Grants disagrees, saying that if something dangerous happens, the little ones would not be able to fight back properly. Ba points out that they cannot allow humans to discover their existence. Of course, they all want Lady Luria to pat their heads and talk to them, but if adults discover them, it could become a massive commotion. Ba then asks how they are supposed to reach the lakeside mansion in that case. Elsewhere, Grauth reads Amelia's letter, and his face immediately pales as he mutters, "Good heavens." His assistant quickly asks if something is wrong. Grauth explains that Amalia, Luria, and Sarah are heading toward the lakeside villa and orders him to prepare comfortable accommodations for them there. The assistant nods immediately and says he understands. Grauth continues by ordering him to send 10 servants as well. The assistant assures him he will make sure none of them become infected before asking how much budget he should allocate. Grauth immediately replies that he may use as much as necessary. Since they will be demanding a lot from the carpenters, they should pay accordingly. The assistant respectfully says he understands and hurries off. Left alone, Grauth falls deep into thought. A little later, he approaches Gilbert, who is currently choosing between books for Sarah and Luria. Gilbert asks which book he thinks is better while holding up both options. Grauth quietly tells him there is something important he needs to discuss first. Then he turns toward Lydia, who looks up in surprise and asks when he even arrives. Grauth remarks that she seems incredibly focused on something. Lydia brightly explains that she is cleaning toys for Sarah and Luria. Grauth repeats the word toys in confusion. Lydia smiles and explains that if they leave things to Luria, she will probably suggest activities like swordsmanship training instead. Grauth admits he can absolutely imagine that happening. Lydia presses a hand against her forehead dramatically and says exactly. Then she shyly explains that because Luria does not care much about dolls, she also prepares animal dolls in hopes that she might like those more. Blushing softly, she admits she also plans to let Sarah play with the toys she herself enjoys as a child so she can figure out what Sarah likes too. At that moment, Grauth lets out a heavy sigh and quietly informs them that Sarah will not be arriving for another 5 days. Gilbert immediately asks whether the Baron disagrees with Sarah coming there. Lydia also asks anxiously what happens. Grauth tells them both to calm down first, but when he finally explains the situation, both of them cover their mouths in shock. Lydia immediately bursts into tears while asking the spirits why such a thing happens because it is unbelievable. Nearby, Corco suddenly looks devastated before immediately sprinting off while shouting to the fairies that this is an emergency and demanding to know where the lakeside mansion is. Meanwhile, Grauth pulls both of his children into a hug and reassures them not to worry because it does not necessarily mean they catch the disease. Even if they do, he will immediately dispatch doctors to them. Gilbert and Lydia compose themselves before telling their father they understand. Gilbert says he will write letters to them, while Lydia says she will prepare supplies and gifts to send over. Grauth nods approvingly and says they should arrange everything so Luria and the others can stay there without worries. After the children leave, however, Grauth falls silent again. He doesn't really believe the Baron caught smallpox. There is a strong possibility it is actually a curse instead. He decides he needs to investigate further and immediately begins writing another letter. Far away in the Varroa district, the priest receives the message and quietly remarks that there is a possibility the illness is a curse after all. He then asks about the Witch of the Southern Wasteland. The man replies, South has been obedient. They haven't been active for the past 5 years. 5 years ago, a certain group called the Witch of the Southern Wasteland cast a curse on Amalia. The Duke brought the group to the brink of annihilation except for those who surrendered. There are countless groups of sorcerers, including small ones, making it difficult to destroy them all. For that reason, the Duke decided to bring the sorcerer groups under his wing to keep them in check as well as to gather information about their fellow sorcerers easier. The priest says if it is not the South, it could be the Witch of the East Forest, Witch of the North Swamp, or the Witch of the West Mountain, and tells him to ask those in the south whether they know who cursed Baron Didier's wife. The man replies as he wishes. The priest thinks if it is a curse and not smallpox, that will be very fortunate for them. Everyone in the underworld knows of the Grand Duke's cruelty and strength. He believes even if someone has requested it, he cannot imagine any witch taking on the task. It is highly unlikely this is a curse. There is a possibility, though, of Lady Luria contracting smallpox, and tells him to send a list of healers capable of healing smallpox to the Grand Duke immediately. The man bows and tells him as he wishes and leaves. The priest then looks up at the church and prays for God to protect Lady Luria. Luria falls asleep for real. Koro wraps his hands around her to wake her up. She jolts awake and realizes she ended up falling asleep. She asks Koro if the maid has left. Then she glances at Sarah, who is sleeping deeply. She calls out to Koro, and he comes out of the ceiling, saying she called. She admits there are many things she wants to ask him. He says she can ask anything, but she should not count on him to answer everything. She asks, first of all, if Marion is okay. He replies that she is fine. The curse has been lifted, and her healing magic has also helped minimize the side effects on her body. Luria lets out a sigh and says thank goodness. He adds that Marion only needs to recover from her fatigue, and it will not be long until she can see her again. Luria thinks that is great news and is sure Sarah will also be happy to hear it. She then clenches her fist and asks why he did not tell her. He asks if she is referring to Marion's disease actually being a curse. She replies yes, saying she is sure the guardian beasts could tell. He admits he did realize it and wanted to tell her, but if she had known it was a curse, there was no doubt in his mind that she would try to lift it no matter what. If she had reacted recklessly, she could have put herself in grave danger. She asks firmly what if she found out too late. He asks if she is angry. She admits she is a bit. He lowers his eyes in remorse and apologizes. She pulls him into a hug and says she knows he wants the best for her, but from now on, he must consult her, okay? She will also talk things out with him. He says yes and apologizes again. She tells him it is fine, she is not angry anymore. Besides, he has helped her a lot. Now she wants to know more about the curse. He admits they do not know the details, but if one borrows power from spirits, it is called magic, and if one borrows power from sorcerers, it is called a curse. There is a group of witch doctors who have inherited sorcery. She asks if he is saying that suspicious group was at the Baron's mansion. He replies that is right. She then asks what a curse reversal is. He explains that when a curse is lifted and reversed, it returns to its caster. She asks if that means sorcerers cannot be cursed. He replies that is correct, but he has heard witch doctors have the ability to redirect curses back to the caster. She asks so the Baron was betrayed. He replies that he is pretty sure he was. She then asks who else knows how to lift a curse. He says some high-ranking church clergymen can do it. She thinks about priests and goes them huh. She then looks at him worriedly and admits she is a bit concerned that the sorcerer might have abilities from 200 years ago. He asks if she is referring to the ability to bind spirits and tells her she does not need to worry about that. She asks so sorcerers can only use sorcery. He replies that, to put it simply, yes. She asks about the church. He says that even the present church of the one God has no one who possesses a binding ability. She lets out a deep sigh and says that they can rest easy for now. She picks Blackie up and tells him she is different from her past life. If something happens, she wants him to tell her. He looks hesitant but softly says, okay. She says she is still a child, but she can always ask her father and mother for help. She then settles on the bed, holding him, and tells him to take a nap with her. He stiffens and says he is a spirit and does not need naps. She smiles at him and says that does not matter. She picks Koro up as well and tells him he should sleep too. He is always on the lookout, but he needs rest as well, or he will not grow bigger. As she nuzzles into them, she murmurs that they are so warm. The next morning, Sarah has already woken up and is playing with Gugu and Koro. Luria sleepily rubs her eyes and opens them slowly, only to find Sarah happily playing with them. She then notices Black is sleeping peacefully in her lap and murmurs, "What a beautiful, adorable little one." Luria wonders if she is talking about Blackie. She then sits up suddenly and calls Sarah's name loudly, making her freeze in shock. Luria quickly realizes she startled her and apologizes. Sarah smiles and says it is okay. Luria then asks Sarah what she sees. Sarah replies that she does not see anything. Luria asks if she is sure. Sarah starts trembling, closes her eyes, and says she promises she cannot see it. Luria tells her she is not mad, but Sarah keeps apologizing. Luria insists again that she is not angry, then leans closer and whispers that it is only between them but she can see them too. Sarah pauses in surprise. Luria tells her she does not need to hide it from her. Sarah asks softly, "Really?" Luria replies, "Really," and admits she has not even told her mother about it, so it must stay a secret. Sarah quickly promises it will stay a secret. Luria thinks that people fear children who can see strange things and often consider them strange or even disgusting. If it had been the Baron and his lover, they would have likely beaten or scolded Sarah. She pulls Sarah into a hug and says she is hugging her because she is her little sister. Sarah smiles and hugs her back. Then Luria asks her again what she sees. Sarah softly replies that it is faint, but she can see balls of light. Luria asks if she can see Blackie too. Sarah nods and says yes, his light is very bright and beautiful. Then she asks Luria what she sees. Luria says she sees a black cat. Sarah looks genuinely awed and repeats, cat. Luria proudly tells her he has 2 tails. Sarah repeats, 2 tails. Before exclaiming that it is amazing. Luria then adds that he also has wings. Sarah stares at Blackie in disbelief and asks whether he has bird wings even though he is a cat. Luria replies that he does. Sarah immediately says that is really amazing. Meanwhile, Blackie is blushing furiously. Luria looks at him and tells him not to be shy and to say something already. Blackie instantly protests that he is not shy at all and that he simply is not speaking because Sarah would not be able to hear him anyway. Luria then asks Sarah whether she can hear Blackie. Sarah quietly replies that she cannot. Luria thinks for a moment before deciding she should introduce them properly. She points toward the glowing orb and says that ball of light is Blackie. Sarah immediately asks whether she can touch him. Luria explains that she cannot physically touch him, but she can still feel his warmth. Curious, Luria asks Blackie how that even works. Blackie replies that he is not entirely sure himself, but once in a blue moon, children capable of seeing spirits are born. Because of their strong affinity with spirits, they usually possess the potential to become excellent mages. Sarah then tugs lightly on Luria's sleeve and shyly asks whether she can actually talk with Blackie. Luria honestly admits that she can before leaning closer and telling Sarah it must stay a secret. Sarah looks utterly amazed and softly says that must be really nice before promising she will keep it secret. Around them, several tiny spirits begin floating excitedly while demanding that Luria play with them. Luria asks whether they really follow her all the way here. The spirits proudly reply that they do. Luria gently pats one of them and affectionately calls them little kids. Sarah then asks whether Luria can also talk with those spirits too. Luria casually replies that she can. Sarah immediately says that is incredible. Luria asks how Sarah sees them compared to Blackie, since their lights are smaller and much fainter. Then, suddenly energized, Luria hops off the bed and excitedly announces that they should play spirit catch because it is good for their growth and they are supposed to throw the spirits around. At that exact moment, Blackie senses the maid approaching and immediately sinks into the floor. A second later, the maid opens the door and tells the girls they should prepare for dinner. Noticing them running around energetically, she comments that both of them are certainly lively. Soon afterward, the girls head downstairs together while following the maid. Luria grumbles that it would be more fun if they were allowed to run outside too. However, the moment the door opens, Corco suddenly comes charging inside and leaps directly onto Luria. Startled, she asks how he even gets there. Amalia explains that he secretly sneaks into the wagon transporting their food. Apparently, no matter how hard they try, he absolutely refuses to get off. Luria immediately hugs him and says she understands now. He realizes she never returns to the mansion. She thanks him warmly for coming to find her. Then she turns toward Sarah and introduces Corco properly, saying he is her friend. Sarah looks up at the creature and hesitantly asks whether he is a chicken. Luria proudly confirms that he is. Sarah carefully approaches him before gently patting his head and introducing herself too, saying it is nice to meet him. Luria then looks at Corco and complains that if he is going to come all the way here, he should at least come directly to her room first. Amalia comments that it actually seems like he spends most of the time circling around the perimeter. Luria immediately asks Corco whether he is patrolling. Corco lets out a proud coo as if confirming it. Luria pats his head and thanks him for working hard. Amalia then notices that both girls are sweating quite a bit and asks whether they are running around earlier. The girls reply that they are simply playing together. Amalia says they might catch a cold like this, so she would prefer them to bathe before dinner, but Luria immediately protests that she is hungry. Amalia sighs and admits she supposes they cannot let the food grow cold, so she instructs them to make sure they bathe immediately afterward instead. Then she tells the maid she will be counting on her help. Once everyone gathers around the table, Amalia explains that the maids will not be doing everything for them like usual during their stay here, so the girls should try handling things themselves when possible. Luria immediately begins stuffing food into her mouth while happily declaring that everything tastes delicious before asking Sarah whether she wants some jam too. Sarah politely says yes, please. Amalia watches the two girls with a soft smile while Gugu, Koro, and Korko eat their own food on the floor nearby like usual. Luria excitedly tells Sarah that there are also pastries called croissants that taste just as amazing, and she even demonstrates the shape with her hands. Sarah says she cannot wait to try one. A moment later, Luria points at a piece of meat and explains to Sarah that it has bones, but she does not need to force herself to eat those. Amalia immediately smiles and points out that Luria does realize people normally do not eat the bones anyway, right? Gugu suddenly shoves his face into Luria's lap. Luria explains that Gugu cannot eat salty foods, so she volunteers to eat his portion for him instead. Gugu then goes to Sarah, but Luria firmly tells her to steal her heart. Sarah looks nervous and quietly says she will try her best, causing Gugu to sit there with the saddest expression imaginable. Soon Sarah finishes eating, but Luria insists she should eat more. Sarah smiles softly and thanks her but explains that she is already full. Amalia reassures Sarah that she does not need to force herself to finish everything because overeating will only cause stomach pain. Then she sighs and remarks that she accidentally uses Luria's appetite as the standard while preparing the portions, so naturally Sarah cannot finish it all. Without hesitation, Luria immediately grabs a chicken leg and announces that as Sarah's older sister, she will eat her leftovers. Sarah repeats, "Older sister." Luria confidently nods and says Sarah hears correctly. Amalia lightly points out that Lydia never eats Luria's leftovers, though. Luria immediately replies that Lydia does not really need food to begin with anyway. Meanwhile, the maid begins collecting the plates while Sarah shyly offers to help her. Amalia smiles warmly and tells Sarah she can help move the cart instead. Then she gently wipes Luria's messy face and praises her for doing such a good job taking care of Sarah. Luria proudly replies that she is the older sister after all. However, Amalia then tells her to look down at the floor. Koro and Korko are currently eating all the food Luria accidentally drops there. Amalia explains that they already do this regularly at the main residence, which means Luria should really practice eating more neatly instead of feeding the animals through sheer clumsiness. Luria immediately protests that if she stops dropping food, Koro and Korko will not have anything to eat anymore. However, after a moment, she decides this involves her dignity as the older sister and declares that starting tomorrow, she will try eating more tidily. And that concludes the video today. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Also thank you God for another day.